Good morning and welcome to the joint general session of the ISO Board of Governors and Western Energy Markets governing body. Please note that all audience audio connections are in listen-only mode. We will be taking public comments at designated times throughout the session. If you'd like to make a public comment, you can press the raise hand icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen to enter the queue. For those of you not logged into Zoom and just dialed in on the phone, please dial #2 to enter the queue. And with that, I will turn the call over to Greg Fisher, California ISO. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm going to begin this morning with a roll call of the members, starting with Mr. Borenstein.
Here.
Mr. Campbell.
Here.
Ms. Decker.
Here.
Mr. Edo.
Here.
Ms. Galetova. Mr. Kanzioka.
Here.
Ms. Leslie.
Here.
Mr. Prescott.
Here.
Ms. Shorey.
Here.
And finally, Ms. Wagner.
Here.
We have a quorum. I'm going to turn it back over to WEM Governing Body Chair, Rob Kanzioka. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Well, good morning and welcome to Tempe and the Valley of the Sun. And kind of like a comment on the weather that like a bad cousin, summer just doesn't want to leave. And those of you following, the Phoenix area is going to be breaking records in multiple ways. The latest days of 110 plus degree weather, multiple continued 110 degrees plus weather, and record for a number of days over 110. So reliability tends to be a focus, and the utilities are well prepared. And I think that the overall coordination in the West makes this service reliability challenge being met, and it's to our benefit and all the customers. So before I turn this over to Chair Shorey, I would like to express my gratitude to the Board of Governors for having this joint meeting here in Tempe. As you heard yesterday, we've been trying to have a focus on regional issues and being out in the region. And the Board of Governors has been so kind to have their first meeting outside of California with us here in Tempe. And along those lines, I would like to express my gratitude to Board of Governor member Leslie and Governing Body member Campbell. They are the ones responsible for scheduling the meeting here in Phoenix. And maybe as a closure to that, it timing wise is interesting. Is my first meeting as a governing body member was supposed to be in Phoenix, and that was March of 2020. And the meeting got canceled the 3 to 4 days prior to the meeting due to COVID. And we've all come a long way since then. And it's great to see this focus come back and get us more into this practice. And I'll end with saying that the agenda, as you will see, has a bit of a Western focus. And I think that's to our benefits. So with that, Chair Shorey.
Thank you, Rob, and welcome everyone. We really appreciate the welcome we're receiving meeting in Phoenix and the opportunity to meet with many of those around the West that are very interested in following the progress of the EDAM initiative, as well as the pathways recommendations, which we're going to hear more about this afternoon. I will say I just looked at my iPhone and the weather is a balmy 90 degrees right now. It was 108 when I got off the plane yesterday. So I suspect we have a ways to climb. I also want to, in addition to thanking all of our Pathways Launch Committee members who've been very patient in terms of being willing to attend meetings and explain to us what they are working on and keep us informed. We do have a very interesting panel this afternoon. The regulatory utility commissioners from around the West have agreed to come and talk to us about the key issues that they are confronting. So I'm looking forward to that, as I'm sure all of you are. At any rate, thank you all for being here today, and let's get going. Thanks.
Thank you.
I think it's
Governor.
back to Greg. Yes,
thank you, Governor Shorey. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes.
Hey, Greg, yes. Before we move on, should we do public comment?
Oh, yes. Thank you. If anybody has public comment, please come to the podium and state your name. And if we have any comment online, Marilyn, could we please ask for that as well? Right, for items not on the agenda, sorry. Any general public comment? Marilyn, can you please ask for that?
Sure. To enter the public comment queue on Zoom, click the raise hand icon located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. When it's your turn to be unmuted, a pop-up message will appear, prompting you to approve the host request to unmute. You'll be unmuted when you approve this request. And those of you dialed in on the phone only line, dialing #2 will prompt you to enter the queue. Okay. No comments at this time.
Thank you. There's no public comments in the room. I'm going to proceed to the item 2. I have a proposed motion for the minutes. Move that the ISO Board of Governors and the WEM governing body approve the joint general session minutes for the August 13, 2024 meeting. Can I get a motion, please? I think that was Decker and then Galatifa, first and second. All in favor? Any,
Aye.
any opposed? The motion passes. Thank you. Item number 3, we have Elliot Mainzer, the ISO CEO, for his report. Go ahead, Elliot.
Thank you, Greg. I'm going to keep my comments quite brief. I wanted to echo from the outset the sentiment of Chair Kanzioka and Chair Shori. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here in the Desert Southwest. Lots of just really important and meaningful relationships here. And to those who are participating in this afternoon's panel, and also for the Pathways presentation, congratulations to that group in advance for getting their draft proposal on the street today. So looking forward to those briefings. I will say, Governor Bornstein, I think your inspiration for Hawaiian shirts is probably coming in particularly handy today with the heat. So thank you for the loaner. I appreciate that. And I think that we're all very just pleased to be down here. We do have a couple of decisional items this morning to get to. We're going to start out with a decision on penalty enhancements for demand response, investigations, and tolling. Appreciate the stakeholder and the work to get that issue across the table in front of the boards today, and also a decision on interscheduling coordinator trades in regional markets. So without a lot of further ado, I'll hand it back to our facilitators and we'll get moving on our decision items. Thank you.
Great. So the next item we have is the decision on penalty enhancements, demand response, investigation, and tolling. I'd like to introduce Anna McKenna, Vice President, Market Design and Analysis. Kick us off. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and good morning, Board of Governors and governing body members. Happy to be here this morning to be presenting this item to you. It is an item that relates to the rules of conduct for market participants in our market. So when you hear penalties, these are specific to rules of conduct, things such as submission of meter data, submission of information to the ISO, et cetera. So we've taken some time to refine our rules of conduct in response to stakeholder requests as to how these impact their business. Before I turn this over to Becky Robinson, our Director of Market Policy and Development, who will be presenting the proposal, I wanted to note that we're doing something a little different this year with this item, where we will be inviting Kathy Anderson from Idaho to present her perspective as to how these rules impact the business. Idaho was a big champion of these changes and helped us really identify the importance and how we can enhance their ability to participate in the markets more effectively. And as well, we took note with their input on how the CAISO itself could administer these penalties more efficiently, administratively less burdensome. So Becky will get started in the presentation, and then we'll invite Kathy. She will be on the screen, not in the room, but it's a pleasure for us to have an opportunity for a stakeholder to provide their business perspective and impact of the rule changes we're making today. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Becky, who I believe is ready to go. Thank you, Becky.
Thanks, Anna. Good morning, everyone. Chair Shori, Vice Chair Board, members of the Board of Governors, Chair Kanzioka, Vice Chair Wagner, and members of the governing body. A lot of you all this morning. Great to see you all here in Tempe. So if we could go to the next slide, please. First, I'll cover some background on this topic area and get into the proposal. So background on the rules of conduct. What are those rules of conduct? These rules of conduct govern ISO market participant behavior, and they apply penalties for rule violations, including for market participant tariff noncompliance, and as it relates to today's item, data submittal failures fall into that category. And you will recall that last September, we brought to you a decisional item on rules of conduct, changing some of the changes, changing the actual calculation of meter data penalties. And so this is a follow-up item to that, where some additional issues were raised, and we worked with stakeholders to kind of continue those conversations. Thank you. And so here we have some context of what are we trying to address with the proposal today. And there's three general buckets of items that we've identified. First is that meter data inaccuracies, small inaccuracies, today, under the rules, they trigger a full investigation because they are considered tariff violations, even though some inaccuracies, some corrections can be quite small. And when they are sort of below a de minimis level, they don't necessarily substantially impact settlement outcomes. But nonetheless, they trigger this full investigation process. The second thing that we're trying to address today is that scheduling coordinators as market participants may lack sufficient incentive to submit demand response baseline data, which is necessary for validating performance during demand response events. And then finally, we've identified certain administrative requirements that pose administrative burden, both to scheduling coordinators as well as to the ISO. And so those are the things that we are trying to address with today's proposal. And now I will, to provide additional context for how the existing rules have impacted a market participant, as an example, I'd like to invite Kathy Anderson from Idaho Power to speak a bit as to how the rules have impacted them. But I will note, to be clear, the rules apply across the board to all market participants across the full market footprint. So this is an example that you'll hear of how the rules have impacted a particular market participant. Kathy?
Marilyn, can you please allow Kathy to access the meeting? Thank you.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. So thank you for the opportunity to present on this initiative today. As mentioned, my name is Kathy Anderson. I'm the Senior Manager of Transmission and Markets at Idaho Power. And I'm going to present on an actual meter error that we experienced just to help you show why this initiative was so important to us. So if you'll go to the next slide. So when we went live in the EIM in April of 2028, the metering for a 19.5 megawatt resource was inadvertently set up incorrect in our systems. At the time, we didn't realize that the generator meter was actually already compensated for line losses. So we programmed line losses into our energy accounting system that we use to gather the meter data that we send to CAISO. So essentially, this resulted in subtracting more losses than we should have from the actual generator value. While this error existed since we went live, due to the timing rules, we were only allowed to submit meter data going back the last 256 business days. So once we found this error in May of 2028 or 2022, we went back and submitted meter data for those dates that fell within that time. Just on a side note, this is a seasonal meter, and so we submitted updated meter data for 139 trade dates. Because under the tariff at the time, this was still a violation, regardless of size, we were assessed a penalty. And just to give you an idea, the magnitude of the error was relatively small for each day. The hourly average of the error was 0.37 megawatt hours, which was basically the 2.65% line losses. So it was really, really a small error every hour. And so, however, the tariff at the time assessed us a penalty of $639,000 for this error. We felt this was excessive given the magnitude of the inadvertent error. So we filed at FERC to have the penalty waived, and FERC did approve that penalty waiver request. Next slide. So during this event, we discussed with CAISO our concerns around the penalty process, the penalty costs. We felt that the original tariff had a disproportionate penalty design with that, original $1,000 per day trading. And so this first issue, as mentioned, was actually dealt with last fall in the rules of conduct, where the solution was to change the calculation of how the penalty was actually calculated. So that was the first step that we thought was a really great improvement on this. So, and this error wouldn't in the future cost us $639,000, but maybe more in the range of $6,000 to $7,000. Then the next thing we talked about, though, with CAISO is that this is a de minimis amount of megawatts, again, 0.37 megawatt hours on an average. And so we felt that there really should be some kind of de minimis band or small materiality threshold, which could be applied to these as well. And that was the second issue that was addressed. And that's what this initiative is actually addressing. Next slide. So the proposal before you today addresses, again, that second issue and addresses introduces a threshold in which small meter data errors are not put through the full investigative penalty process. This actually saves time for both CAISO and the scheduling coordinators. The proposal was developed through a CAISO staff and stakeholder engagement where Idaho Power was an active participant. The process allowed us and other stakeholders to voice our concerns and develop with CAISO staff solutions that helped address the issue. CAISO staff listened to our concerns and suggestions for improvements, and the proposal before you represents that outcome of the collaborative process. Next slide. So first, I want to thank CAISO staff for the work on this initiative. And then also just let all of you know that we support this proposal and encourage the Board of Governors and the governing body members to approve it. We feel it represents a collaborative effort which improves the current rules by removing de minimis penalties for small meter data inaccuracies. And again, thank you for the opportunity to present our perspective.
Great, thank you, Kathy. I appreciate those comments, and your thanks to the staff reminds me that I do want to thank Jill Powers and Dinesh Dasgupta on my team for leading the stakeholder efforts on this item. Thank you, Kathy. And so I will continue with the presentation now, sort of say more about the proposal today. Okay, so thank you. All right, the proposal today, the first thing that it does is it introduces a materiality threshold, as you just heard Kathy describe. It introduces a materiality threshold for meter data penalties for inaccuracies, such that inaccuracies less than either 3% or 3 megawatt hours over the course of the day will not be penalized because they won't be considered a tariff violation. And we feel comfortable with this change because we feel that small meter data corrections really don't rise to the level of warranting a penalty or the need for a costly investigation, which is a time-consuming process for both staff and the market participant.
What percentage of all the violations that you've seen to date are small like that? Is that a large number that warrants us going into this initiative? I assume it is.
I don't have a percentage for you, but I will say it is not simply Idaho Power that has been in this situation. I think there have been other market participants. There was a number of requests for waiver of rules of conduct penalties in the past couple of years at FERC. and some of them fell into similar fact patterns. So it's not sort of a one example driving the change. It is multiple, but that's a good question. Happy to follow up with you.
Yeah, great. I assume it's not de minimis to warrant, this is action, so, but I'd
Yes.
like to know. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so the second thing that the proposal does today is establish due dates and well-defined penalties around demand response monitoring data. And so here you see a table on the slide sort of showing the deadlines and penalties for meter data of all kinds, from generating resources and so forth. We are aligning demand response penalties with the deadlines and penalties with the deadlines and penalties that we have for meter data as a whole. So under the current rules, there's not necessarily any penalty applied to demand response monitoring data. Again, this is data that demand response scheduling coordinators submit to us to calculate the baseline against which demand response performance is measured during actual demand response events. So we are sort of creating clear deadlines for 52 business days after, after the event, and aligning the penalties to follow the structure that we have for meter data. Next slide, please. Oh, that's Christina. And why are we doing that? We have DMM, the Department of Market Monitoring, has observed some significant and ongoing problems with timely monitoring data submittal, given the sort of lack of, again, well-defined deadlines. And so, again, this monitoring data forms the baseline that we evaluate their performance against for demand response resources. So we think it's appropriate to align those deadlines and penalties with what is required of meter data generally. Next slide, please. And then the final sort of bucket of things that the proposal before you today addresses is to alleviate some administrative burdens that we have identified in the course of discussing these issues with stakeholders. The first, and then within that bucket, there's a few specific things that I'd like to highlight. The first of those is to introduce a 30-day period where we wait to actually assess the penalty, so to actually collect money from a market participant for a penalty, so that they can, if they so choose, go to FERC to seek request a waiver. FERC has discretion to grant relief of these types of penalties if they so choose. And so rather than have us go ahead and collect the dollars of the penalty and then potentially have to refund them to the entity if FERC does grant the waiver, we're saying let's introduce an initial 30-day period. If they seek appeal, we will wait and let that FERC process play out before we actually sort of collect the dollars. And so this is something that we heard from market participants, sort of saves the, if you will, reputational risk of having to pay a penalty that they might actually get relief from having to pay. So, and it streamlines things on our side as well in terms of having to collect things and then having to refund them. So the second item within this bucket is that we are streamlining our investigative process in terms of following up on the tariff violations of meter data inaccuracies. So today we have a 3-letter investigative process. We're combining some of those steps and so it'll be a 2-letter process. And then finally, today, under the rules, if a Power Marketing Administration encounters a meter data inaccuracy, we send a report to the U.S. Secretary of Energy. We are eliminating that report because we feel it's unnecessary and sort of it just isn't. It's not a necessary part of our process, and we're comfortable eliminating that report. Next slide, please. And then you heard from one stakeholder, but we did get broad stakeholder support from this proposal. We had several stakeholder meetings, opportunities for written comment. We've incorporated feedback into the proposal that's before you today. Specific stakeholder concerns that the proposal addresses include, again, that materiality threshold for inaccurate meter data penalties, as we've discussed. Also a courtesy warning as we approach the 52 business days deadline, to let folks know if, if we haven't seen submittals from them yet, let them know that, hey, as a reminder, that was a specific ask from stakeholders and we can do that. And then finally, we reduced the historical monitoring data period that the data needs to cover from a 90-day retrospective to 45 days. We think that should cover what is needed under most baseline calculations. Next slide, please. And then this is my last slide. Management recommends approval of these proposed changes to the rules of conduct. Again, just to recap as a summary, it removes penalties for de minimis meter data inaccuracies. It creates a structure for demand response monitoring data submittal timelines and penalties, alleviates rules, alleviates administrative burden for both market participants and the ISO, and it received broad support from stakeholders. So with that, I'll pass it back to you. Thank you. Happy to take any further questions.
Thanks, Becky. At this time, we'll turn it over to questions or comments from the board or the governing body.
Governing body member Campbell.
Thank you, Becky. I have two questions related to the demand response monitoring data piece of this. One is, what if you could speak to the consequences of not receiving timely and accurate monitoring data today, and also the consequences of receiving more accurate and timely information in the future, if that is what happens as a result of this. My second question related to that was, what sort of monitoring would there be, or sort of assessment of whether this policy has made a difference as it pertains to demand response monitoring data?
That's a good question. So I think that what are the consequences of the sort of not getting the data that we need versus going forward is really being able to more rigorously validate demand response performance in a more timely way and in a more in a clear way where that's it's an important part of our market when we have these events, and certainly want to give credit where credit is due and want to have clear data to be able to support that. So I think this will be a much better footing for us going forward. In terms of evaluating how will we kind of assess this going forward, I think we will want to monitor this data as it's coming in, evaluate, have a good look at it, make sure we feel like the quality has improved from the rule changes, right? And we will plan to do so. Trying to think of the venue of where we may report that out. We're happy to take that back. It may be something that I know we, I think there will be opportunities to report on demand response events, certainly in the summer reports and that sort of thing, as well as in DMM's reporting. They often report on demand response data. So.
Thank you.
Becky, I had one quick question. I was interested in the Idaho Power case study example. It looks like this was a situation where Idaho Power apparently identified this transmission line loss inaccuracy in accounting themselves, and then reported it, got it corrected, and then ended up with a penalty. You're only proposing to change the penalty part. We will still have the reporting and the correction going on when people identify meter data inaccuracies? Or do they have a 3 megawatt get out of jail free card? Which I recognize is a very small amount, but if everybody did it, it could add up to something. So I'm assuming that's not the case.
Fair enough. Yes, I think that's correct, the way that you framed it. So it's not that we are saying don't bother making corrections, or you're not required to make corrections if you find out that things are wrong. It's that there will not be a penalty applied to those.
I think Governor Edo had his hand up first, if you don't mind.
So add on to Andy's question. Is it the case that complete monitoring data is sometimes not submitted, or is it just that it's submitted late? I mean, are the data being provided, but they're just not being provided in a timely fashion, or are the data being provided, but they're incomplete and never completed?
That's a good question. So we do have, under the current rules, we do have the ability to specifically request the data. And when that is the case, we do have the ability to, under the current rules, apply a penalty for it. So we do have a stick, if you will, under the current tariff. But it's, say, more manual rather than sort of institutionalized. So I believe that in the past, where we have not gotten, in the first instance, the data we needed, we would have followed up with the scheduling coordinators to ask for and get that data. But it's more that it hasn't been sort of a well-established timeline where people just are, know what needs to be submitted and do so in a timely way.
That's a great, helpful word. Thank you for that clarification.
Go ahead, John.
Okay, thanks, Becky. I appreciate this presentation, and it sounds like a logical answer. And thanks to Kathy and her team at Idaho Power for working on it. My question deals with the threshold now being at 3%. And just, I'm thinking of it theoretically, if one entity is always bumping just under the 3% all the time, consistently in perpetuity, does that create an issue? Would there be like maybe I know it's not a penalty, but heads up? I'm just wondering, because she gave some numbers that aren't huge, but they could mount up over time. And it could be kind of a leaning perception.
Sure. No, that's a great question. And I think that's an important area to sort of make sure that we keep tabs on, especially in light of this change that we're proposing today, to make sure that that doesn't happen, right? Because if we observe that happening and, if that seems sort of like a intentional, if you will, I think there are avenues we could pursue, right? Where to make sure that that does not continue to be the case. I'm sure we will be monitoring. And, if we were to see that, we may consider whether, is the changes that we are putting before you today, are they playing out in a way that we intended or not? But I think there's always, the capability, for instance, of the Department of Market Monitoring to make referrals to the FERC Office of Enforcement if they feel like there's sort of an intentional, abuse of the structure, for instance.
Can I just follow up quickly? You're saying that if somebody were doing that, you wouldn't have to come back to us to do some enforcement. You could actually go to FERC and talk about enforcement.
Correct.
That's
Correct.
just what
DMM
I
always
wanna
has
make
that.
sure. Thanks.
Member Decker, you have a question?
I have a comment versus a question. So what I really appreciated about bringing this forward is it was driven by stakeholders. And that's something we get a lot of criticism, that things are not driven by our stakeholders. And I think this is a really great example where it was driven by stakeholders. It was addressed expediently. And I think this is a reasonable solution from a de minimis. And as you mentioned, there'll be monitoring. If someone is abusing, I think it's going to get picked up if they're trying to be under the radar screen at 3%. So I really appreciate what you guys have put together in this proposal, and it's one that I'm going to support.
Member Deck.
Governor Gilistova.
Thank you so much, Becky. This was very useful, and I agree that streamlining and alleviating administrative burdens is always good. Can we in the future maybe have an update on the quantifiable benefits, if they can be quantified, and what the results are in terms of whether it's saving administrative time or whether it's reducing instances of where you're spending time reporting de minimis violations? That would be great. Thank you.
Happy to follow up on that and take that up. Thank you for the suggestion, member.
Chair Conzioka, did you have something?
I did, and thank you, Greg. Two items. One is, Kathy, thank you for participating in this presentation. That was different. It was unique. I thought it was very helpful, and I thought it enlightened us a bit more than than we always sometimes get. So appreciate you taking the time, and I know it's a lot of effort to get prepared to do this. So again, much appreciation. The other comment is, Becky, this feels a little bit like it has taken a play out of the reliability playbook, where It started off being really harsh. Everything was treated equally, and it was excessive. And it evolved quite a bit over time to put the emphasis in the areas where it needs to be, and then treat things that are minor lightly. And I like the way in which you have moved this, and maybe we'll see more of it. But I think that is a very good approach, and I will be supporting this as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any further comments from the board or the governing body? All right. Seeing none, we'll open it up to public comment first in the room. If there's anybody in the room that has wants to make a statement, please come to the podium and state your name and your affiliation. And seeing no movement here, we could then go to the phone lines, see if there's anybody who has a comment on the phone lines, please.
To enter a public comment queue on the Zoom, click raise hand icon located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. When it's your turn to be unmuted, a pop-up message will appear prompting you to approve the host request to unmute. We do have a comment.
Okay, please state your name and your affiliation, and then we can begin.
Hi, Matthew Plummer, PG&E. PG&E appreciates the opportunity to provide comments in support of this initiative. You've had a very thorough briefing today, so I'll just say this provides clarity to the market, encourages the conduct expected of market participants, and provides transparency and efficiency in resolving potential violations. This initiative is a very positive step towards the goal of increasing the participation of demand response resources in the market and deserves your approval today.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments?
No other comment. We do have one other. Oh, I'm sorry. They just lowered their hand. Okay, here we go. We do have one now.
All right, thank you. Go ahead. Is Mr. Desmond? Go ahead.
Good morning. My name is, as you said, Joe Desmond, and I'm the Executive Director of the California Efficiency and Demand Management Council. I want to thank you for the opportunity to address the CAISO Board of Governors and the Western Energy Markets Governing Committee in support of the CAISO's penalty enhancements, demand response, investigation, and tolling, otherwise known as PEDRIT, the PEDRIT Stakeholder Initiative. Before I go further, I would like to thank the CAISO for following up on its commitment to address the penalty issues in the PEDRIT initiative that were highlighted in the joint appeal of proposed revision request 1444 by the Council, Leapfrog Power, OhmConnect, Olivine, and Voltus. The Council greatly appreciates the pragmatic and flexible approach taken by CAISO staff in this initiative to ensure that the CAISO's data requirements are met without imposing unnecessary heavy burden on demand response providers. The Council recognizes the CAISO's need for timely and accurate information from market participants. Without this, the CAISO's responsibility to operate an efficient and transparent market becomes difficult. And to that end, the Council supports the proposed penalty structure for missing demand response monitoring data. I would also like to express my full support for the materiality threshold that PEDRIT would create for settlement quality meter data. Without this threshold, penalties could be assessed for very small quantities of missing data, as you've heard today, while having a negligible impact on the CAISO's market operations. Especially it's important for third-party providers who rely on the IOUs to provide customer data on a timely basis. Though the IOUs generally deliver the vast majority of this data within the appropriate time frame to allow DR providers compliance with CAISO requirements, there are occasional occurrences of late or incomplete data. So in summary, the Council supports all of the PEDRIT provisions that apply to demand response, and we reiterate our appreciation of the staff's ongoing consideration of demand response community feedback. And accordingly, we respectfully urge the CAISO Board of Governors and WEM governing body to approve this initiative. Thanks once again.
Thank you. Michelle, do we have any more comments?
No further comments at this time.
All right, thank you. So the next item or the next part of this then is to propose a motion. I have a motion to read here. Moved that the ISO Board of Governors and WEM governing body approve the changes to the rules of conduct as described in the memorandum dated September 19, 2024. And moved that the ISO Board of Governors and WEM governing body authorize management to make all necessary and appropriate filings with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to implement the changes proposed in this memorandum, including any filings that implement the overarching initiative policy, but contain discrete revisions to incorporate commission guidance in any initial ruling on the proposed tariff amendment. Can I get a motion, please? And a second. That'd be Wagner and Edo. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Thank you. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is item 5. We have decision on interscheduling coordinator trades in regional markets. I'm going to turn it back over to Anna McKenna, VP of Market Design and Analysis, to kick this off as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Well, I have the pleasure of introducing Milos Bosanek, who was in front of you about, I guess, over a year ago on a very exciting day. He presented the EDAM proposal and the wheel-through proposal to you. I was just checking in with Milos, and it looks like he's had a busy year since then still, even though that was quite an exciting day for all of you, I'm sure. Today, he's going to present something that came to our attention earlier this year as, again, a business need for our market participants and stakeholders. This is not an item that you would have seen on the roadmap because we didn't have it on the roadmap. But earlier this year, we were contacted by our customers and the WEM participants and potential EDAM participants indicated that the use of an inter-SE trade, which Milos will describe to you more fully, that would be a beneficial service to their participation in the regional markets. This is an instrument that is already available for participants in the CAISO Balancing Authority area and that participate in our day-ahead and real-time markets. But folks expressed this would actually add a lot of value for them. And so we took that on as an additional item for stakeholdering this year and took it through the stakeholder process. We determined that the impact of this to systems was minimal, and therefore it was a service we can readily provide to customers. Mark's very happy right now, I could tell. So anyway, it was a service we felt we could provide readily without imposing too many costs or disruptions to our plans for implementing EDAM in 2026. And so wanted to highlight that because it's an item that's not in our roadmap. We took care to make sure we could deliver it in a timely manner and provide service to our customers. And with that, I will transfer it over to Milos Bosanek, our sector manager for regional markets. And thank you, Milos, for being here today.
Is an optional feature has no impact on market optimization, market scheduling, or market dispatch. It's not associated with any aspects of the market operation except facilitation of some of the settlement aspects of this. And importantly, today, this functionality is only available within the ISO balancing authority area, and it's not a feature of the EIM areas or the future EDAM areas, and that's what we're looking to extend this functionality and this feature to. If we go to the next slide. So with that context, what management proposes is the extension of this inter-SC trade functionality for trades of energy to be a feature of the EIM and the EDAM areas. In the EDAM context, both loads and resources are participating in the market through the submission of economic bids or self-schedules, and are also settled through the market. So there are pricing locations for both loads and resources. And market participants can find value then in effectuating these inter-SC trades at those specific locations where there's a price associated with the generation. In the EIM, the participation is a little bit different. You have participating resources and non-participating resources. Participating resources are settled through the market. There's a price at those locations where it's not associated with non-participating resources. But nevertheless, with the extension of this functionality, parties can find value in effectuating inter-SC trades, particularly at participating resource locations. And that's what we've heard through the stakeholder process as well, that this is a value in the EIM as well today, to the extent that there are contractual arrangements between parties that provide for the disposition of market revenues, and they want to use the inter-SC trade functionality. I do want to note on this slide that, again, reinforce that inter-SC trades is an optional feature. Stakeholders or market participants are not required to utilize this functionality. They can continue to settle their bilateral arrangements outside of the market settlement process, just like they do today, where there's a price for the contract, there may be provisions for the disposition of market revenues, and all that settlement happens between the parties outside of the market settlement process. So this is an optional feature that can enhance potentially some settlement of those bilateral contracts if the parties want to take advantage of that. So we did run a stakeholder process. We went through 2 iterations of stakeholder proposals. We had multiple stakeholder calls on the effort. We took stakeholder comment as well, and stakeholders supported the extension of this inter-SC trade functionality to both the EIM and the EDAM. Stakeholders indicated that, again, they see value in providing this functionality to market participants in both the EDAM and the EIM because it supports and eases some of the settlement of bilateral contract arrangements between the parties. And inter-SC trades are a prevalent function of the ISO balancing area today. So some of those same scheduling coordinators that participate and effectuate these inter-SC trades in the ISO balancing area today, they have the experience and the expertise to also effectuate that in the EIM and EDAM areas if this is approved. The functionality, again, also supports diverse business needs based on the nature of the contractual arrangements and the parties that are subject to it. And we've also heard that inter-SC trades can also further help integrate bilateral markets in the West. That's the next. So with that context and that background, management recommends to the ISO Board of Governors and the Western Energy Markets Governing Body to approve the extension of the inter-SC trades of energy market feature to EIM and EDAM areas. As I noted, it provides additional optionality and value to those market participants in the EIM and the EDAM. And the inter-SC trade functionality, as Anna mentioned, we've done an assessment. It's something that we can implement and integrate with the EDAM implementation efforts and can become available in 2026 to both EIM and EDAM areas at the same time. So I'll pause here for questions.
Thank you. Let's start with Decker. Go ahead, please. Decker.
So, it's great. I always love listening to you. You're just so articulate. But just looking at when you're talking about the optionality, someone can voluntarily decide to do it. What would be an example of why someone would not want to use this?
It may depend upon the nature of the contract and the disposition of the market revenues, how complicated is the disposition of those revenues, are there any special provisions? But But that's, I think, the primary, it's does the bilateral contract and the structure of it support that type of use of inter-SC trade functionality. And then I think as you extend this to the EIM and the EDAM areas, to the extent that there are newer scheduling coordinators, it may take a little bit of time just to become familiar with this feature, how it's utilized. So it may take a bit of time for them to become comfortable with utilizing that.
So to that point, will the ISO offer some kind of training as this gets implemented to help them understand how to use it?
That's right. That's right. There will be, as part of market simulation, there will be training on the functionality. Parties will have the ability to test inter-SC trades and effectuate it in the simulation period, and see how it works. And there will be also detailed business practices. We have those already in place, but we'll, through the business practice development process, we'll highlight those again as a feature of the EIM and the EDAM. So there will be, in 2025, additional opportunities for training and testing the functionality.
Well, again, I mean, this is a market improvement, so an optionality, but a market improvement. So this is, again, something that's easy to support.
Member Prescott, go ahead.
Thanks, Milos. That was a good presentation. I'm going to vote to support this. It makes a lot of sense. Just a couple of notes. The speed at which it went through the process shows that it can be done. I know there's a lot of details that had to be worked through. Question I've got is that the way I'm looking at this, there's a source and sink in the deal, bilateral trade. So it balances, which means there's no residual or room for liability back to the market. Would you just confirm that?
That's right. That's right. That's right. And we also have a number of validations that are in place to ensure that these are real inter-SC trades that can be effectuated. There's validations at different steps in the process to ensure both parties to the inter-SC trade are submitting the same information at the same location for the same amount of megawatts. If none of that matches, then the inter-SC trade is invalidated, and we settle with the scheduling coordinator that, for example, bid at the resource directly. So there's a number of validation features in the design at different stages to ensure that we're settling these appropriately between the parties.
Okay, thanks.
Vice Chair Wagner.
Thanks, Milos. Very helpful. And just want to confirm that the implementation of this would coincide with EDAM implementation.
That's right. At this point, we're targeting 2026, commensurate with the EDAM implementation efforts.
Okay, thank you.
Chair Kanzioka.
Milos, like the others, good presentation. Terrific to see this particular topic presented today. And as repeating a comment that Member Decker had on the previous approval item, that very responsive, meeting needs, and having something that is a really good benefit to all those who are participating. I wanted to follow up on the question that Member Prescott had, and that is on the verification. That makes sense that both parties, have to have it in there. It has to match. Is there a provision, or will there be a provision such that, let's say, something is just slightly off, so it looks to you as if it should match, but it doesn't? Is there a reconciliation process to allow the parties to get that corrected?
That's right. Yeah. As part of that validation, initial validation, to the extent that some of the information doesn't match, we send a notification back, automated notification that something is off, that we were not able to match the inter-SC trade, and it allows then the parties the ability to review and potentially correct the inter-SC trade to ensure that it matches. So there are validations, and to the extent that we catch anything in time, they're notified and are able to correct.
Excellent. So as the others have said, this is a very good proposal. I think it's very helpful for the market, and we'll be happy to support this.
I just wanted to ask maybe a quick follow-up on Rebecca's question. The proposal is supposed to be rolled out when we roll out EDAM implementation in 2026. We have a number of participants who are staging their decisions at different dates. Can people who are only in EIM and not yet in EDAM use this? when we roll it out, or do you need to be in both EIM and EDAM?
No, it's for both EIM only entities as well as EDAM entities.
Okay,
Yeah. So
and the
across-
people that are still only EIM,
right.
but might be getting ready for EDAM could start using this in twenty
That's right.
twenty-six.
That's right.
Vice Chair Bornstein.
Yeah, thanks, Milos. This is great. I just wanted to, so there is some trading charge associated with handling these trades. And there's been some cost analysis that trading charge is based on. I didn't see numbers here, so just was one.
That's right. There is a grid management charge for each inter-SC trade that's effectuated. And yes, we've calculated, I believe, yeah, I think the current one is probably, I think $1 or so per inter-SC trade. And, but yes, each one of these activities has a charge associated with, including inter-SC trades.
Great, thank you.
Any more comments from the board or governing body? Okay, thank you. So for public comment, we have first, we have one in the room who is signed up. It's Jim Shetler from Balancing Area, Northern California. Welcome, Mr. Shetler. Like your microphone.
Is that one now dead?
How about that?
There you go.
There you go. You have to watch these ISO guys. Sometimes they turn the power off.
Oh, boo.
I know. Well, I was going to do the introduction here, but I think you all know who you are. So, my name is Jim Shetler. I serve as the general manager for the Balancing Authority in Northern California. I'm here today for two things. One, yes, to support this initiative. This has been determined to be a pretty important issue for us with the Wapa Sierra Nevada region that resides within banks, their ability to participate in EDAM. They view the capabilities that the inter-SC trading offers will allow them to meet their legal requirements and how they serve their customers. So it's an important issue for them. So I appreciate you considering that and would support you in approving it. And then secondly, I want to, even though I did give a little bit of a hard time to the ISO staff here a minute ago, I want to express my sincere appreciation to the ISO staff for their responsiveness on this. We identified this earlier this year as an issue that might be a stumbling block for us. They got on it right away, went through the process, and I appreciate them considering bringing it to you on a little earlier schedule than they originally thought. It will help us get through our approval processes internally. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Shetler. Anybody else in the room have public comment? All right, seeing none, let's please go. Michelle, please open it up to Zoom and phone participants.
Once again, if you'd like to enter the public comment queue on Zoom, click the raise hand icon located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. When it's your turn to be unmuted, a pop-up message will appear prompting you to approve the host request to unmute. When you are unmuted, please state your name and affiliation before making your comment. And if you're on the phone only line, please press #2 to enter the queue. At this time, no comments.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to read the motion. I'm not going to do it slowly, but I'm going to get through this. We are running ahead of time. Yeah, I'm going to read it one word at a time. We run the efficient markets. We run even more efficient meetings. So moved that the ISO Board of Governors and the WEM governing body approve the proposed extension of the inter-SC trades for energy feature to WEIM and EDAM areas as described in the memorandum dated September 19, 2024, and moved that the ISO Board of Governors and WM governing body authorize management to make all necessary and appropriate filings with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to implement the change proposed in this memorandum, including any filings that implement the overarching initiative policy, but contain discrete revisions to incorporate commission guidance in any initial ruling on the proposed tariff amendment. I'd like to invite a motion.
So moved.
Shori is moved.
Second.
And second, Decker, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Mary. Mary first, Decker second. All right, we've got time to duke it out, so. All right, so moved, and now we'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
So
Seeing
Greg,
none.
after first and then second, yeah.
Well, I don't know. There you go. The motion passes unanimously. With that, we are going to, I think, discuss taking a break at
Greg,
this time.
Rob and I were just talking about the fact we were looking at the agenda and we are assuming we can't move up any of the other agenda items. Okay, so that needs to wait, and Arizona State is not here yet? Oh. Oh, okay, because we
All
were
right.
thinking we could do item 9 informational
yeah.
reports.
Sure,
If there was anything.
item 10 tends to be kind of quick, but
Yes.
we can get rid of it. That's fine.
Item 9, all I wanted to
Yeah,
ask
I will.
was there a DMM report? Because I didn't get one, so I just wondered if there was one that was supposed to be in there.
There was I saw the public posted DMM report.
Oh, you did? Then I'm just the one that. didn't
Memo?
get one. All right, I'll go hunt again.
All right, so that's item 10 then. Any questions on or need for other information?
Does not appear to be.
All right, so for now, we'll take a 15-minute break. For those online, we'll be back in 15, approximately 10:50, pending further notice. Thank
Greg,
you.
is that to do the Arizona State climate plan?
It's to both move.
Move both.
Yeah,
of them.
item 6.
No, we're getting a no. Yes?
Yeah, we might be able to finish before lunch.
Oh, just the commissioner panel.
Yeah,
Got it.
right. All right, so for now, we're taking a 15-minute break, back at around 10:50. Thank you. So welcome back. We're going to continue now with item 6 on our agenda. This is a discussion with Western utility regulators. Title of the presentation is Current Initiatives and Challenges for Utility Regulators. I'm going to turn it over to Stacy Crowley, Vice President of External Affairs for the ISO. Go ahead, Stacy.
Thank you, Greg. Good morning, Board of Governors and WEM governing body members. I am very pleased to be moderating a distinguished panel of utility regulators here with us today. Thank you for making the time to travel to be with us today, as well as taking the time to prepare your thoughts. I know that you are busy, all very busy people, and I know this does take time, but we are very much looking forward to your remarks today. We had a panel of utility experts here yesterday, and they had a number of key themes that I think we are going to be talking with you about here today. First is sort of the reliability in the face of some extreme weather and extreme load growth. They talked about the value of the large footprint and the market trading that is possible with a large footprint in our EIM. And they also talked about sort of recommended actions that we all need to think about in the future. That includes things like transmission planning, congestion on transmission, stakeholder engagement, and some other things. So with that context from yesterday's panel, we are looking forward to hearing from you all today. We had an opportunity to chat before the panel and agreed on some questions, but we also agreed that we wanted this to be sort of a comfortable dialogue amongst you three. So I will ask 3 questions, and they'll each have an opportunity to respond, and hopefully it's a kind of a back and forth. But first, I want to introduce the panel. We have with us Commissioner Kevin Thompson. He's with the Arizona Corporation Commission. And Commissioner Thompson brings 25 years of experience in utility, regulatory, and public service. A United States Air Force combat veteran of Operation Desert Storm, Commissioner Thompson has served twice elected Mesa City councilman and co-founded the Mesa Veterans Resource Center, which supports veterans in employment, healthcare, and mental health services. In his role as council member, Kevin set utility rates for Mesa and served as president of the Arizona Municipal Water Users Association, advocating for water resource planning and policy development. He also managed new business development for Southwest Gas, overseeing the installation of extensive natural gas pipelines. Since January 2023, Kevin has been a commissioner with the Arizona Corporation Commission, serving on the Western Energy and Balance Market Body of State Regulators and the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners Electricity Committee. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and has received multiple awards on his service. Kevin and his wife Donna have been married 33 years and have 2 children. So welcome, Commissioner Thompson. Next, we have Commissioner Aguilera. He is, sorry, switch my paper here. A commissioner with the New Mexico Public Regulatory Commission. Commissioner Aguilera has been with the commission, appointed in December 2022. He currently serves as the vice chair of the Western Energy Markets Body of State Regulators. He has a background in public utility regulation when he served in multiple positions at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, including senior policy advisor, supervisory energy industry analyst, and economist. His extensive experience at FERC has equipped him well with a deep understanding of utility tariffs, gender interconnection rules, and the integration of renewable energy resources onto the grid. Commissioner Aguilera holds a Bachelor of Business Administration in Finance and Economics from New Mexico State University and a Master's of Business Administration from University of Maryland Smith School of Business. My sister worked there for a long time. Raised in southern New Mexico, he has a strong connection to the state and a commitment to serving his residents. His expertise in the Western U.S. energy markets and his dedication to stakeholder engagement make him a valuable member of the New Mexico Public Regulatory Commission. Gabriel resides in Santa Fe, New Mexico, with his wife and son. And finally, Chair Haley Williamson, the chair of the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada. She has been with the commission since 2020, where Governor Steve Sisolak appointed her and reappointed by Governor Joe Lombardo in 2023. She has worked at the PUCN since 2013 and previously served as Senior Assistant General Counsel and Acting General Counsel. Haley is the chair of the Western Energy Markets Body of State Regulator and serves on the NARUC board as well. She supports her state and community by also serving on the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency. With over a decade of utility law experience, she has been instrumental in developing rules for Nevada's renewable energy portfolio standard and representing the PUCN at Nevada Supreme Court and FERC. She holds a Juris Doctorate from Vermont Law School and a Master of Philosophy from the University of Cambridge, where she wrote her master's thesis on renewable energy and land use issues on the West Coast. Prior to working at the PUC, she served as a law clerk for the California Public Utilities Commission and the EPA, within the EPA. She also taught environmental law and environmental science at the University of Wisconsin and Sierra Nevada College. She was born in Madison, Wisconsin, and lives in State Line, Nevada, with her husband and 2 cute kids. Which I had the pleasure of meeting. They're adorable. So today we are looking forward to hearing from you. As I said, we had sort of three themes. The first one I want to talk about is what I call postcards from the summer, right? How was your summer? A little show and tell. And we had this same question from the utility panel yesterday, but I want to hear from you about your interesting and maybe challenging conditions that you all faced this summer and how your electric grid within your state performed. So with this, I'm going to start with Commissioner Thompson, and I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Great. Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting me to speak, and thank you for coming to Arizona and visiting us. Your timing was a little off. November, December, January is usually better. No, but this year, as you can imagine, I mean, here we are at the end of September, early October, and it's still 110. And it wasn't that much different in August when all of our utilities hit another peak load. I think APS and SRP both were running right around 8,200 megawatts, a little over 8,200 megawatts, which was a new record peak demand for them. I think TEP and SRP were running, TEP and Unisource Energy were running about 2,900, a little over 2,900 megawatts, which is also another peak. They beat last year's record by about 60 megawatts. And so it puts a lot of strain and a lot of demand on the system, and kudos to our utilities here in Arizona. They kept the lights on. And you can imagine when it's 110, 115, it's paramount that the electricity stays on. You know, we had roughly 113 days where our temperatures were over 100 degrees. At that point, your air conditioner never shuts off. It just stays on almost 24/7. And so that's part of that demand. You know, used to, we would have our monsoon season, and late in the evenings, you would get a giant dust storm that would blow in. That was about, 4 miles high and all the way across the city, and it would dump dust on everything. And then it would rain right after that. So it was enough to muddy up your vehicle. So you just didn't wash your car at all during the summer. But our monsoons have been lacking, and a lot of that reasons because we have a heat island here. And so we're not getting the relief from our summer rains like we used to, where it would cool down the cities. And so, our utilities do an amazing job, and I think we were ranked in the top 10 for the states with the most reliable grid, reliable electricity. I think that's why you see a lot of businesses coming here. I think that's why you see a lot of people moving here, not only for our weather, but also for the reliability. There was a poll that was done a few years ago, and it asked people to rank in order what was most important to them. And the number one was reliability. And number two was affordability. And I thought it would be just the opposite, because we do have a lot of folks from, elderly folks that come in. We call them snowbirds here. They come in from Chicago and Michigan and Wisconsin and Canada. And a lot of them decide to stay here because they get tired of the cold there. And so with the influx of older folks coming into to Arizona, I thought affordability would rank number one, but it's actually reliability. And people are willing to pay a little bit more to keep the lights on 24/7. And so for our commission, that's job one for us, is making sure that our grid remains reliable and resilient, but we're also making sure that it's not done on the backs of the consumers in Arizona.
Yes, definitely important to keep those air conditioners on when it is that consistent high degree temperatures, even now. Commissioner Aguilera, do you have thoughts about this summer? I know we had someone yesterday call it uneventful, but hear your thoughts.
Well, I do largely agree with that. I mean, the summer was uneventful. A lot of it is thanks to additional battery storage, and also thanks to cooler weather than we normally have. It's funny how, we talk about the weather here, but it's more than just small talk, because, we all know what it means, because it's so important to our jobs. And so I do have a few stats to share with you that I found surprising. So our largest city in New Mexico is Albuquerque. The average temperature in Albuquerque in July was 5 degrees cooler than in 2023. And in July and August, Albuquerque had no days over 100 degrees. So we hit 99 degrees. And so that's compared to 17 days in 2023. We also have a reliable grid in New Mexico, and we have nicer weather. So
We do too, but you have to go north to find
it. El Paso Electric, that is in the southern part of the state, and also in El Paso, Texas, they had a similar experience. They had a peak that was lower than they did last year, and they over forecasted, which, if you want to be off on your forecast, I think over forecasting is the better way to go. And then, we did have a few heat events that put some strain on the system. In New Mexico, one unique thing about us is that part of our state is in the eastern interconnection. And so we have utility Southwestern Public Service that is an Xcel Energy, and they're a part of the SPP. And so they had some events there when you know those situations where everything comes together. You know, it's just the right circumstances to create a hard time for the utility operators. But they had times where SPP had very low wind, high temperatures, high loads, transmission outages. And so those situations, are did happen over the summer, but they put out a plea for reduction in consumption, and people responded. So everything was fine. And then in terms of wildfires, I think we've been relatively lucky in New Mexico compared to other states. We did have some wildfires that were started by people around Ruidoso, and those were pretty bad. And then suddenly they got a lot of flooding, which helped with the fires, but also caused a lot of destruction. And so I think overall, I agree that things were pretty uneventful, but also feeling pretty lucky and know that we cannot rely on summers to be like that every year.
That's right. I think it's hard to know what to expect, right? And you would think with a neighbor having such long heat waves and really not translating further east it's hard to predict, right? It's really hard to predict. Well, Chair Williamson, I know Las Vegas had some extreme heat in the early parts of the summer. I think it tapered off, but tell us about how summer went in Nevada.
Yeah, thank you, Stacy, and thank you all so much for having us. And thank you both for setting this up and for being on this panel with me. I was just looking this up because I knew we were getting close to the record. Las Vegas just broke its record for most 100-degree days ever on September 25th. So still hot. Currently outside, I think we see that across the desert Southwest. NV Energy, our primary utility, it's a dual peaking system, but 90% of our population lives in Las Vegas. So we peak in the winter in the north and we peak in the summer in the south, but at 100-degree days, over 100 days, it's unsustainable. We worry a lot at the commission. We spend a lot of time and thought putting in rules around customer protection. And so if people haven't paid their bills for a certain amount of time, we're not cutting them off at certain temperatures, and making sure our consumer protections are really robust around that, because you're starting to talk about a health issue when you're getting this hot. So a lot of our time and effort, and I think my colleagues mentioned that, but just around the health piece of this. We also, I think, had a fairly uneventful summer despite having record heat, which I guess it could be worse. We didn't find ourselves in any extreme events. Our fire season, and I'm glad Commissioner Aguilera brought that up. The other thing that sits top of mind for me as a state utility commissioner all the time is fire. Those of us on the West Coast know there is no fire season anymore. It's year round. We see fires, I mean, honestly, year round. We just came off of a fire between Carson and Reno that closed the highway. That got very scary for a lot of people that live in that area. Not utility created, but what's really interesting though is our power company has become, because they have so much experience now with fire, managing fire, our emergency response teams, it's this really interesting partnership now. They also have our cows, which I'm from Wisconsin, different cow, it's Cell on Wheels. So they have some of our tech that our emergency crews are dealing with. So we're seeing this really interesting world in utility regulation where we're reaching more and more out into first responder land, into fire territory. I'll share a fun fact with you that those cows, again, from Wisconsin, hard to say that and talk about not the animal, but Burning Man, 2 years ago, everybody got stranded and NV Energy actually provided the cell towers to help people get out. So strange fun fact out of Nevada. But so this is, I guess, sort of to my point in the summer, these are, in addition to what my colleagues highlighted in the system itself, we're being asked to take on more and more as utility commissioners that is into the realm of emergency response, emergency planning, things that are just so outside of traditional, rate case and IRP bread and butter. And we welcome that at the commission, but it's changing. I'm sure it's changing for all of you as well as you delve into these new topics. And it is taking us a little while to get staffed up, to get an expertise in these things. And then again, I can't stress enough that the health and consumer safety and protection issues, in addition to the rates, as you can imagine, paying for air conditioning for that kind of heat gets really expensive really quickly. So I will say that, while uneventful for the grid, these are also the things that your state utility commissions are dealing with as the summer goes on.
Yeah, these are under the category of other duties as assigned, right? Not what
the other is expanding.
Right, that's right. And I actually did want to ask you all if there are surprises in your job, right? I mean, I think some of you have served longer than others, but I think there's probably something that always or has surprised you in sitting in this role. Can you describe anything? Maybe it's just sort of the scope of your responsibilities has grown, but I don't know if there's any surprises you've come across.
Honestly, every day. And I mean that in a good way.
Yeah.
There's new things to be learned every day. But it's, and I don't mean this facetiously, but it's all fun and games until your power goes out, right? It's so integral to our society, to our life. I think what's on the top of my list of surprises right now, and I know we'll get into it a little bit later, but the AI demand and just how that's like, surprise, we might not have enough power. That's terrifying, but that's new, right? We weren't talking about this 6 months ago. So I would say every day there's something new that we're looking at and dealing with at work.
One thing that has surprised me, I guess, is so we have a lot of parties who provide really good input and care a lot about the issues that we have before us at the commission. And I see that in the record, and I see, because I see really good deliberation and arguments being made on, either side of an argument. And so we've been, because we moved from elected to appointed, we have been trying to get out of Santa Fe. And so we've been doing like this, open meetings outside of Santa Fe. We did one in Hobbs, New Mexico, and one in Farmington. And both of those parts of the state have energy is just really important, and for different reasons. In the Four Corners area is where we had some coal retirements that have caused, a lot of job losses and exacerbated the poverty levels that we have in the state. It's already a poor state. And now I'm getting to the surprising thing is that we don't get a lot of engagement from the public. So, we try to advertise the meetings and invite people, but they don't come. And so, I'm trying to figure out what to take from that. I know that we have a lot of voices that, have something to say in our dockets. And I also understand that from an affordability perspective, people are hurting. And then at the same time, we have, we're traveling for these commission meetings and then almost nobody shows up. And so that's a little bit surprising to me.
I spent 17 years in the utility industry, worked at the LDC here on the gas side. I worked with the commission in my previous lifetime. So I kind of came in with my eyes open. I knew what I was getting into. What I didn't realize was how intricate and complex the electric grid is. And I think every single day I'm learning something new about electricity. I'm a mechanical engineer by degree. I chose to be a mechanical engineer because electricity and electrical engineering made absolutely no sense to me. I don't understand how something can go back and forth, alternating current. It just makes absolutely no sense to me. So mechanical engineer is where it's at. So I'm learning, I'm learning parts and pieces almost daily. And I think what is also surprising is how quickly technology is changing and adapting. I went to UNLV, graduates. I'm a rebel, and and we were talking a while back about laptops, and I was like, "Are you kidding me? They didn't even have these when I was in college, right?" And we were lucky if we had a KaiSo, calculator to run our crunch our numbers on. And so, but now you have, iPhone 16s, right? And the technology is ever changing. And we just went down and toured a few months ago, down in the Patagonia Mountains on the Mexican border, and looked at South 32. It's a big mining company. It's coming in, and they've discovered the North America, and I think it's the America's largest manganese deposit. And they're already starting to experiment with manganese batteries that the technology is showing that they can hold a charge for up to 8 to 10 hours. That's a game changer in our world, right? No more relying on China, no more relying on lithium. It's less volatile. And so, so that technology is changing and adapting. And it's so fascinating. And, when I was on city council, it was all about economic development, bringing jobs, right? And I used to always say, wow, what an amazing time to be on city council and seeing the things that are coming to your city and that'll benefit the citizens. But now I say, man, what an exciting time to be on the commission, because you're seeing firsthand the technology change almost daily. And it's just as fast as these things are changing, technology is changing with it.
Well, it's absolute perfect segue, because I think the next topic we wanted to talk about is really the future, and the future is now in some cases for you all. And we're thinking, and probably really across the world, because of some of these technology advancements, artificial intelligence, and certainly in the U.S., the desire to bring manufacturing back into the U.S. So let's talk a little bit about sort of the exponential things happening, right? Growth in all of these things and the associated needs that come with it, and the speed that it needs to come. So would love to, I'll start with Commissioner Aguilera, just talk a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of how what's happening, what we know is going to be happening is sort of right in our face.
Yeah, so in New Mexico, we have green chili, and we have the best food in the West.
I agree.
But aside from that, we're very similar to all the other states. So we need more power, and it's increasingly complex and difficult and expensive to get it. And I know that's an issue that is something that we're all dealing with. And then growth estimates also vary widely, from like EV use, potential data centers interconnecting, natural gas production. The gas and oil industry is enormous in New Mexico. Another surprising thing is that it provides about 40% of our state budget. And so there is tremendous growth in having to electrify the Permian Basin. And so that's also another thing that is a little bit surprising and kind of a paradox that we have in New Mexico, is that we have the oil and gas industry really wanting to electrify and clean up their operations. And they can't get power soon enough. And a lot of this is in SPS's territory. But I've had multiple meetings over the last months, with the oil and gas industry, just emphasizing how much power demand they have, and how difficult it is to get it. And, you know, right now they're running diesel generators, and they have tons of them, and they're running right now. And so I tell them, I also don't want you to run those. So we, you know, and then we have, you know, obviously our environmental regulations and with new technologies. We have a lots of demand for power. And so, you know, we also have to deal with the uncertainty of how much, which is really important because the grid in New Mexico is at capacity. So anytime you try to interconnect new load, you're really talking about having to do expensive upgrades. And so just as a few statistics, PNM's IRP shows that it expects another 1,500 gigawatt hours of economic development loads by 2030. And I also have to put this into context because you all have cities that have a larger population than our entire state. So when I say these numbers, recognize that proportionally, this is a really big deal for us. And then for SPS, they're going to have to build an additional 2,400 megawatts of capacity to keep up with demand and unit retirements. And again, you know, that's over half of SPS's peak load. And so now I'm starting to maybe go on a tangent trying to remember what exactly you asked, but I think it's, you know, the future is now, and then you know, we're looking to see what we can do to meet all of these demands, you know, through like innovative rate design. So embracing time of use rates and other ways to financially incentivize consumers to reduce their demand, you know, when during the peak. And then the other conversation obviously has to do with transmission. We need a lot more of it. In New Mexico, we have the RETA, the Renewable Energy Transmission Authority, which is really the only way that we have to build transmission in New Mexico, because otherwise we have to rely on West Connect, and unfortunately that's not you know, a viable option, as West Connect has not produced any regional transmission. But RETA has been helpful. The SunZia line, for example, is something that has you know, is coming to fruition largely because of that. And I think I'll stop there. Let my colleagues here maybe chime in.
Yeah, Commissioner Williamson or Thompson, does the really the question about the exponential growth and what you're seeing and what your state might be doing about it?
Yeah, well, first, I think what Commissioner Aguilera meant to say was besides Nevada, New Mexico is the best state. So just a quick clarification there. But I think everything else you said, I agree with. It's so interesting right now that tech is driving so much of what we see in our world in sort of two different ways. Tech is driving this exponential demand for power, and tech sort of with that demand and drive, I think tech is driving some of the answers, and I hope they continue to do so. I'll butcher the quote, but there's a quote that the most complicated thing man has ever done besides landing on the moon is building the US power grid. So I think that's probably true. I couldn't do it. It's amazing someone did. But as we see the load growth come on, and I think we'll talk about that a little more, even evaluating how real that load growth is, because you have to remember as state utility commissioners, our ratepayers are paying for that. So we have to be really careful financing some of those projects. And so I think that's another thing that's important, is that I give a huge shout out to our advocacy community in Nevada, who are, and the national labs and some of the other places that are testing this tech, that are bringing this tech to the commissions and saying, here is a pilot project that worked. Here's what you should be looking at. Here's the advances in technology that you should be paying attention to. And then we can start to look at those studies and look at that information coming to us so that we're not taking that chance with ratepayer money, which we do sometimes on worthy pilot projects, but that's really helpful when you're coming to your commission with some of that tech, with some of that information so that we can have it and start to vet how far along in the process it is. I will say that in Nevada, we're incredibly proud of our geothermal technology. I think we're one of the only states that has this. And we just, to my point, that tech is driving some of this. Google has partnered with a company called Fervo Geothermal, and they have sort of revolutionized geothermal drilling. They're figuring out new ways to drill wells. They're figuring out more efficient ways to do it. And they're proposing to power one of their data centers up north in Reno with this geothermal technology that Google has very proudly helped invest in. And so I think what we're seeing is, tech driving some of that demand, helping to put some of that answer in, but sort of to your point as well, I think batteries are, that's gonna solve a lot of this. When we figure out lengthier batteries, not just 3 to 9 p.m., but all night. We're in Las Vegas. We're a night-driven city. So I think that we need to keep working on the battery equation and how that fits into our grid, because I think that's going to be a huge piece of it. And I do. I think the national labs and other people who are working on that equation. I think that's my additions here.
Stacy, would you mind if I drill down just a little bit?
Sure, yeah.
Because I would love to get your feedback on this. So I get asked a lot about AI and the growth of demand. First of all, there are skeptics out there. John Kumi is probably the most famous of them, who point to what happened 20 years ago when data centers were going to eat the grid. And what happened instead is the data centers got technically more efficient and the computing got more efficient. And the numbers are just shocking. Like they had an 8x increase in output with a 6% increase in demand. So I'm wondering if you sort of heard that and what you're thinking on that. Secondly, I'm curious about how you're thinking about the liability of the demand, particularly do new load connections face the risk of shortage, or is that really getting socialized onto like residential customers? It seems like both the reliability risk and the cost risk. So Ohio last week, the proposal, I guess, is shifting the cost risk, if that goes through, by saying you want the connection, you're liable for it for 10 years, and what you think of that. And finally, certainly crypto, but also AI, it seems, is just an incredibly flexible load because it can be moved around the world. And it seems like in some ways that should be the perfect load for what we need and not straining your grid, because at peak time, you give them the right incentives and they shift to doing that computing in Wisconsin. So how are you thinking about all of it?
Well, I'll take a shot in this. Where's Anita Decker? Anita, this is the point at which I say, I have an open docket on this, so I can't talk a lot about it. She was like, you're not going to say that, are you? I was like, I might. We have, so these are excellent questions. And I will say Nevada is in the middle of our IRP right now. I have load growth tables pending in front of me with AI in them that we have, that I will tell you, we are vetting this in real time. Your questions are so spot on for what we're looking at right now. I watched the Ohio decision with interest. I think I actually wanted to hear, I'm really looking forward to Kevin's answer on this, because we're also looking to what Arizona is doing. They've come up with some solutions as well. We have to figure out who pays for this, how to pay for this. And I think I will say to your question though, on the loads, I don't know how real those are. I don't. We're vetting that as we talk. I do know that if they're coming in with the gigawatts of load that they're telling us they're coming in with, that's incredibly expensive to build out for it, and we don't have the transmission for it. And so we're transmission constrained. We need to figure that out, and we need to figure out how to plan. Are they even going to your point, if we've built all of this and they didn't pay for it all, What happens if they leave in 5 years? Are ratepayers ending up with a bag at that point? So are we planning 20 years out for this now? Is that even wise as fast as this technology is changing? We're building the ship as we're flying it. Plane, I guess, is more apt
Whatever.
analogy. But I think your questions are spot on, but I do want to be very cautious because I am currently in the middle of a multi-thousand page filing with 27 parties who are all interested in the answer to those questions. So I hope Kevin's gonna.
Actually, on the filing point, it's also important to remember both utilities and the computing centers have a really strong incentive to overstate this. You know, if they don't take the downside risk, Sam Altman wants you to be ready for his computing in case he needs it.
Just in case. Well, Kevin's going to answer it all though. I know he is. Sorry, Kevin.
Great. No, we have IRPs in front of us. We just had our IRP meeting, and I think we're going to be voting on those in the next month or so. But, you know, in Arizona, as I mentioned earlier, you know, we have a lot of people, a lot of industry moving here. And I think up until recently, Maricopa County was one of the fastest growing counties in the nation. And with that, you had more and more business, more and more data centers coming. I think Phoenix in the metro area right now is ranked second behind Virginia for data centers. And so we're experiencing a lot of that pain on demand. And, you know, talking with APS, a while back, and they said, you know, what took us 100 years to build, we're going to have to build in the next 10 years to meet the demand. And SRP is basically the same thing. They're saying, you know, what took us 20 years to build, we're going to have to build in the next 6 years to meet that demand. And from a commission standpoint, you know, I'm trying to figure out to your question, because we know that you may have 3 or 4 co-locate data centers, and they're all chasing that one client. They're all chasing Microsoft, or they're all chasing, you know, whoever. And so is the 8,000 megawatts really 8,000 megawatts, right? Is it only really 1,000 megawatts? But you've got, you know, all these different data centers that are vying for the same plant. And so we're trying to weed through that to try to figure out what is real load. What is, you know, at what point do you take it serious, right? Because the utility has to look at it and say, wow, I have to build out for 8,000 megawatts because that's what is, you know, that's what's knocking on our door. But is it really? And so we're trying to get to that. And I just met with a group, a co-locate group, data center group. And I said, you know, what you can do to help us is try to be the solution and stop being the problem, right? So start looking at behind the meter solutions, whether you're bringing your own generation with a microgrid, whether you're, you know, putting more solar on your roof, whether you're investing in CHP, whatever it is, try to be a solution and not a problem. And so, you know, it's an ongoing discussion. I'm trying right now to get the co-locates and the utilities in the same room together, and they're all freaking out. Well, the utilities are freaking out because they're thinking it's going to be a shouting match. I'm like, it's not going to be a shouting match. I'll be there. And then they're like, wait a minute, what are you going to be there for? You know? So it freaks everybody out when the commissioner shows up. I'm like, oh my God, you people. You know, so I'm just, because these things are not going away. It's only going to get worse. And I would rather be out in front of the crisis and trying to find solutions to it instead of being reactive. And, you know, we have to, as a commission, we have to look at, you know, who does pay for it. Does, you know, in the municipal world, growth pays for itself. And so I kind of take that same approach and say growth has to pay for itself. And if the data centers and the technology, you know, if they've got the money to invest, then you need to pay for that. Now, if it's generation that's going to benefit the whole of the system, then you can spread that peanut butter across the rate base. But if it's only for that company, then they need to pay for that. We can't pass that on to our residential consumers across the state.
Have any of these large loads talked about being part of the solution on transmission bill? Because I think it's been a resource bill discussion, but have you heard any of them talk about the transmission needs?
I haven't
Yeah,
in Arizona. They're just, they want power and they want it now.
Yeah.
And the utilities is like, yeah, we would like to give it to you now. We just can't give it to you now. And so, we're taking the baby steps, but we have to, we have to take those baby steps before you can, take the leap. And so if we can get out in front of it, if anybody else has experienced this, I'm open. I would hope that I'm not the first one that's saying, okay, let's get everybody in the same room and have the conversation, have an adult conversation and figure this out. But if I am, then cool, I'll lead the charge, but we have to find a solution to this.
Yeah, I think that's right. But address most of your questions. Is that right? It's
We could go
ongoing.
on for another half hour. So
Well,
maybe over lunch. I'd
yeah,
love to talk.
it is I mean, it really is fascinating. I think we're all watching this, just trying to see what's real and what to do. I think it sort of leads into the next question. It's sort of, we call it, it's a marathon and a sprint, right? So right now we're dealing with market issues and really trying to identify how to be most efficient with the resources and the transmission that you have today. And markets have found, sort of helped with that, but also recognizing the long-term planning needs of the state and the needs there. And so it's sort of, you're busy enough, and it's how do you deal with both at the same time, right? We have to act quickly on some things, and we also have to look long-term. So how do you manage that, the sort of, I guess, duality of the work that's happening in your state on both the near term and the long term? Chair Williamson, I'd like to start with you.
Yeah, thank you. And here's where I get to do a shameless plug back and say thank you to CAISO for helping us and coming to, I don't even know how many times you've been to Nevada to explain, what is that again? And you're like, we talked about this last month, but you don't. You're always very kind about it. So thank you. One way, and I mean this seriously though, one way that commissions manage some of these things, we can't possibly have staff that are experts in this. We don't have staff that are experts at FERC. We don't have staff that are experts in markets because we don't belong to a market. And so we really rely on outside groups. We rely on WEB, we rely on CAISO, we rely on SPP to tell us what they're up to. We rely on people coming in to talk to us and give us those presentations, and we really welcome that. It helps us stay informed of what's happening. And it's so interesting. Actually, I said this to a FERC commissioner once, and I'll give it away a little bit because she looked at me and was like, okay. But I said, who's on first here? Are you on first? Am I on first? I plan for Nevada, but you want me to look across state lines to look at transmission? I can't. That's not, but I have to if I want this line to make sense in the future, but I can't. This is my boundaries. She was like, yeah, that's the problem. But that's it, right? I in the market discussion is what's fascinating about this, and it's a marathon and a sprint, is that my job as the chair of the Nevada Public Utilities Commission is to balance interests of shareholders and ratepayers in the state of Nevada. But the reality is, if I don't start to plan and pay attention to the market and recognize those efficiencies, I'm not doing that job. So it is dual track. I've seen it really interesting go both ways as well. I've seen people start to look at microgrids as some of the solution for efficiencies, go smaller. I've seen, the efficiencies certainly in market proposals go bigger. Maybe it's all of the above, but it's a shift from traditional state utility planning, and one we're taking seriously and learning. But my fellow commissioners, I wish I could sit down, and we can in some groups, but just say, where are you putting your next line? And just by their goodwill, they can tell me. But they're not really required to do so. So at conferences and we build trust among the West, but I think it's an informal network of experts who are driving a lot of this and trying to figure this out and creating some of these more robust stakeholder groups and studies. But it's been a learning curve, trying to plan and trying to make those decisions in the best way possible, and even to get up to speed on what's happening in the markets and trying to realize. So what we're doing now at the commission in Nevada is taking that information and saying, okay, now how does that apply to our state? What are the benefits for our state? So we've done a sort of a two-phase docket where we posed a whole bunch of questions. If Nevada were to join EDAM and extended day-ahead market, what are the criteria we're looking for in Nevada? What are the benefits we're looking for? How do we quantify that? I want to say it's like 20 to 30 questions that we've asked. And so the next phase is our utility will file with us to join, they've announced their intention to join EDAM, and we'll go through that list and say, do we think this benefits Nevada? And so, but that was whole cloth, and it took us about a year with stakeholders to come up with that list to start the vetting process. So it's been a marathon and a sprint, and as you're all aware, transmission planning is really slow. So you have to stay on the issues, you know, plan intrastate. I can permit Greenlink. We've had an intrastate transmission line go through, but still have to stay engaged in the west-wide conversation of the transmission planning and market conversations, and do that dance of how does this benefit my state, but how am I looking outward to answer that question?
Yeah, that's a challenge. And I know Commissioner Aguilera, you've been holding some workshops as well to ask sort of the big picture questions, but interested in your thoughts on sort of that near and long-term balance.
Yeah, it is something that we absolutely focus on trying to balance, and it is a balance. You know, I agree with Commissioner Williamson about you know, not having the resources that we really need to be ahead, and so we rely a lot on other sources to help us with it. You know, I think in New Mexico, we're just trying to move forward with an open mind and really embrace whatever solutions can help us. And, you know, for example, another one of our workshops is on grid modernization and integrated distribution plans. And so that's something that I think we really need to get together to kind of take a step back and, you know, lay down a foundation of where are we right now and where is it that we really need to be. And there are a lot of unknowns, but this gives us an opportunity to figure out what is real and what is not. I think the side that we try to balance is affordability, because I think you know, we have so many great pieces of legislation. I think in New Mexico we have a really good foundation with like grid modernization and Community Solar Act, Transportation Electrification, Energy Transition Act, you know, all things that really appealed to me when I, you know, was searching for this job. And then on the other hand, you have to figure out how to pay for that. And I think there is a way to do both, but it takes a lot of planning and figuring out how you're going to maximize the use of your investments. And so I think, yeah, definitely a marathon and a sprint, you know, with the end goal of trying to balance all of these competing issues.
Anything else to add, Commissioner Thompson?
You know, Arizona is a little bit unique in that we are elected officials and not appointed. And so with that came really a change. And our focus, you know, when we were on the campaign trail, my seatmate and I, and we were running the campaign together across the state, you know, one of the things we talked about really was trying to bring that regulatory stability back to Arizona, because we had heard from a lot of people that Arizona was dead last, right behind Washington, D.C. And so we're trying to bring that stability back. We're trying to get the utilities to really focus on their core mission of providing electricity, right? And so when we first got elected, we started going through our rate cases and we were really trying to trim the fat. You know, that's how we were looking at it. But as we started digging in, we realized there was a lot of things that previous commissions did that needed to be cleaned up. And so we started cleaning up. And I think, one of the things that we're doing now is we're eliminating, and it's got some people upset, but we're eliminating the energy efficiency and DSM mandates, from the commission. It was something that they did back in, in the early 2000s, and right now, the consumers have paid over $3.5 billion into these programs. And I would argue that a lot of these programs were more just to pat myself on the back and say, we're doing this to meet a mandate that you put in place, right? And so we're really pushing the utilities to get out of the EV charging. You shouldn't be installing an EV charger as an electric company. That's the market's job. There's vendors out there that do that for a living. So get back in your lane, produce power, and keep the grid reliable. And so we're really pushing that. There was a lot of programs, and I'm still going through these DSM and EE programs, but we have developers that have been making a ton of money off of the backs of the ratepayers. And, our utilities are paying developers to install energy efficient appliances in brand new homes. And I'd argue that you don't see a brand new home out there. I mean, can you even buy an appliance now that's not energy efficient? I mean, why are our citizens, why are our consumers paying for that? Because the developers aren't reducing the cost of the house. Our home prices are skyrocketing, and at the same time, utilities are delving out incentives to developers. And so we're cutting all that. So we're really diving in deep. We're trimming the fat. We're getting the utilities back in their lane, doing what they're supposed to be doing. For the longest time, we had commissions that were very anti-natural gas. And so they were pushing the renewable envelope. And that kind of got our utilities away from providing or building new baseline generation. And so when people ask me, what keeps you up at night, there's a gap. And it's growing, and I'll use the airplane example where, we have growth and load that's taking off like an airplane, but we have generation that's looks like an airplane landing. And so there's a divergence of generation and demand. And so that's what keeps me up at night, because we're still a fast growing state. We're still bringing in data centers. We're still bringing in, advanced manufacturing, but at the same time, we're looking to start closing coal plants, and we're not building any new gas generation that's filling that void. And so that gap just keeps growing and growing and growing. And at some point in time, it's gonna tax the system enough that it's gonna shut down. And I've told the utilities it's not happening on my watch. So you better come in with an IRP that's real. I mean, I called one of our utilities and I told them, I said, I don't know whether I should laugh or cry looking at your IRP, because you're not solving the problem. You're just throwing crap on a piece of paper and saying, here's our 5-year plan, but your plan's not showing me how you're keeping the lights on for the next 5 years. You're showing me graphs that say the lights are going to go out, but you're not showing me graphs of how you're going to keep the lights on. And so the president of the company actually came and visited with me to tell me how they're going to keep the lights on, made me feel a little better. But I'm like, that's what you need to be telling the public. You need to be communicating that to the public of how you're going to keep the lights on, because that builds trust with the communities. And so, so those are the things, the marathon is looking long-term down the road of how do you keep the lights on, but the sprint right now is how do you keep the lights on and do it so that you're not forcing the consumers to pay out of their pockets for all this fluff that have been pushed on them for years.
Yeah, that's great. And it's a challenge. I can feel it and see it in our interactions with most of the Western states and the commissions, is that they've got some challenges in front of them. And I think for the most part, the utilities are seeing that and trying to become better partners with you all in this sort of new reality. So I think that's great. I know we're coming up on time here. I guess I know Rob and his utility panel did a great job of asking folks for sort of a 1 or 2 word answer to kind of what their most important challenge was. I would say you're in a unique audience here with the ISO Board of Governors and the WEM governing body here. They're focused on sort of the markets and transmission and really sort of the efficiency that that wholesale energy market can do for all of us. Do you have either a request from us, something that we can do for you, or something that is really hot on your list of things that you're keeping an eye out for in the world that we are in today, or the market world? Go ahead, Shirley.
Build us some new transmission.
We are trying. We are. That's that. Okay. Good answer. Commissioner Aguilar.
Well, I definitely agree with that. I'm trying to avoid, talking about our regional transmission planning process and that we have in New Mexico. I think for me, it's just going to be about market design and making sure that it's efficient, because we have, as I said, so many good pieces of legislation in New Mexico. It's exciting, and they're also the reason that I stay up at night. It's the affordability piece of it, trying to do all of what the legislature has asked us to do, while recognizing that about 40% of New Mexicans are low income. And so I've mentioned this before, that we're looking for the solutions, and I'm hoping that regional markets could be part of that solution and provide us more affordable energy. So that's what I would say is consider the market designs that are going to help, as it trickles down to a customer's bill. How is that going to help them, especially in New Mexico, where 40% are low income?
Thank you.
I think I'm really impressed how the Pathways group has come together. We were just talking about that earlier, about how, back in November, we were in Las Vegas on a panel talking about an RTO and day-ahead market. And you and I were on that panel, I think. And so, but, there were people in the audience who are like, we want it now. And we're like, it ain't going to be now. But here we are less than a year later, and 2.0 is already being pushed out. I think there's still a lot to work through. The governance piece is going to be the biggest hindrance, and how we get there with the state legislature and the governor as well. I think if we see success in that lane, you'll see our utilities start really waking up and paying attention to it. They're watching. They're part of the discussions. They're not completely happy where 2.0 is, but I think as it advances, I think they'll get there. And so I'm just super proud of all the work that the Pathways Initiative Group has done to get us where we're at today. It's they've moved mountains.
Thank you for your participation in that as well. Well, that is a good segue for what happens after lunch today, which is a briefing from the Pathways Launch Committee members on their ongoing work. And I really want to thank all three panelists for their time and really insightful comments today. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Stacy. Great panel. We're going to break now for lunch. Those of you in the room, it's right outside. Please step outside and grab your lunch and have it in here in this room. For those of you online and on the phone, we will be back on at 1 p.m. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. The meeting's back in session. Now we're going to move on to item 7 on the agenda. This is a briefing on the West-wide Governance Pathways Step 2 proposal. To introduce the topic, we're going to have Stacy Crowley, VP of External Affairs for the ISO. Thanks, Stacy.
Thank you, Greg. Good afternoon, everyone. Board of Governors and WEM governing body members. Welcome back from lunch. We have a wonderful duo here ready to provide an update on the West-wide Governance Pathways Initiative. They're looking at the Step 2 part of their process. And first, I just want to thank both Kathleen and Pam for making the trip here today. They have been traveling around the West, working with stakeholders on this project, and so happy to have them take the time to do that here. Thank you for the entire launch committee's set of hours. I don't know if you counted the hours, but it's a lot to get to this point you are at today. And we thank you for all of your efforts. So I will turn it over to you two.
Thank you, Stacy. And thanks to all of you, the CAISO Board of Governors and the WEM governing body for inviting us. We're very excited to share our proposal with you. Thanks to the CAISO staff. And I think maybe I'll even start there. The CAISO staff has been an amazing partner, really. We have an official agreement that the CAISO provides technical support, and they have been an amazing ongoing support and feedback and input, and really has been always available to answer questions. So thank you to the entire CAISO team who has been very available to all of the crazy ideas and questions that we've had along the way. I'm Kathleen Stacks. I'm the Executive Director of Western Freedom, and I'm also one of the co-chairs of the launch committee. And I'll let Pam introduce herself.
I'm Pam Sporborg. I'm the Director for Transmission and Markets at Portland General Electric, and I am the other co-chair of the launch committee. And I also want to thank all of our launch committee members. We have several here, including Jim and Amanda. We have many others on the phone. We have 26 of them, plus a number of additional interested stakeholders who participated in the working groups that we ran over the summer. And we would not have this document or this work product without the dedication of all 26 members of the launch committee. The launch committee has been a convening body. We've brought together, I think, the most diverse group of stakeholders to work on governance in the many iterations of governance conversations, where we have members from California, from labor, we have large load, many utilities, both investor-owned and public power. We have consumer advocates and NGO representatives. So just an incredibly diverse coalition from all corners of the West that have really come together to, I find, a vision and a pathway towards governance reform and independence over specifically the energy market components of the CAISO space. And that diversity has created a very comprehensive document where I think that diversity has been a strength, where many of our launch committee members had particular interests, and those interests really drove some of the deep engagement on issues from corporate law to state law, to the relationships around contracts and vendor engagement, financing, and all sorts of things that utility nerds and market nerds usually don't get into. But that diversity really helped us, I think, drive a lot of the comprehensive nature of the 133-page proposal that you have today, we were able to publish today.
So if you're having trouble sleeping, it's riveting, I promise. So Pam and I are going to walk through a little bit. We wanted to, I think, kind of take a minute to kind of set the stage and talk a little bit about how we got here, where this thing started, and some about the process. And then we're going to really jump into the details of what's in this proposal. But I think the context is really important to sort of set the stage and ground us in why this group even came together. Next slide, please. Excuse me. Next, we really got to get rid of the transition slide. So, in July of last year, 9 regulators from 5 different states, Washington, Oregon, California, New Mexico, and Arizona, issued a letter that really laid out the mission of this vision for creating a new independent entity and overcoming some of the challenges that we've faced in the West for a very long time, primarily because of the way the CAISO board is set up. and recognizing that that is a barrier for other entities to want to join and go and give up their transmission systems and give up control over their assets to get to a full RTO. As I said in a presentation yesterday, it could be an organization run by Wyoming and people would feel the same way. It doesn't have anything to do with California. It has to do with the fact that it's a single state that has this control. So I think it is, so that has really been kind of the boogeyman out there. And the idea was we really need to be able to overcome that barrier and create a path for the West to coordinate and build and expand its market services without having this sort of political challenge that exists. And so so the regulators put out this letter and the launch committee developed a mission and charter early on that highlighted and really anchored itself in what was in that letter. And so some of the key points are that we wanted to be able to have the largest footprint possible, including California, that we wanted to have independent governance over all of the market operations, wanted to build on the existing infrastructure and success that the CAISO has had with the real-time market, and to minimize duplication and incurrence of costs. So really thinking, we don't want to create something new. We've got something that works really well for the West. So how do we take advantage of that infrastructure and minimize costs as we are trying to make these changes? So those were really important drivers for the work that we did. And then having the ability for this new entity to ultimately add market services as the West wants them, and evolve up to and including an RTO. And so those were really the sort of underlying premises for the work that we took on. Next slide, please. So to ground our work, we developed a set of evaluation criteria to make sure that we were able, as we came up with ideas, to be able to come back to many of the things that were in that charter and that original letter, but make sure that we were thinking about each one of these different options with the same set of criteria. One I wanted that's really important to call out here is this number 8 criteria, respect for state authority to set procurement, environmental, reliability, and other public interest policies. It has been fundamental and critical to all of the states to make sure that nobody else is exporting their state policies to anyone else. It's fundamentally important in California. It is fundamentally important in Montana. And this has been something that I think has really been kind of a unifying factor in these conversations. How do we make sure that we are respecting state authorities? This is really, this particular evaluation criteria really expanded to include local and federal as well. So we'll see those words more in the proposal. This was our early, we heard loud and clear from our from our public power and federal and the PMAs in the launch committee. This is that we need to make sure that we are very clear that we're including all 3 of those perspectives. So this was so again, this was a really important criteria for the work that we were doing and trying to make sure that all of the recommendations that we were putting forward respect all of these really critical components: governance, structure, optionality, and then the respect for state authority. Next slide, please. So after a first round of stakeholder input, the launch committee coalesced around a 3-step process. We brought the step 1 proposal to the CAISO, which your bodies voted to approve in August. So thank you very much for that. We're very excited to see that move forward. And just as a reminder, what that does is elevates the WEM governing body from its current joint authority with the CAISO to a primary authority over the market services. And so that is, there's a trigger associated with that that will happen when we have more implementation agreements signed, because we have some. And so what we're going to spend most of our time today is this step 2 piece. And this is really the recommendation for creating a new independent entity that can have sole authority over the market services. And it was very important though to make sure that we were communicating with the West that we intend for this thing to continue to be able to grow. Again, as the West wants it and as utilities demand it and stakeholders demand it, we need this new regional organization to be able to add market services. It's beyond the scope of the Pathways Initiative. It's not part of what we're recommending for now, aside from recognizing and recommending that there is a path in the future. So that was really sort of step 3 piece. Next slide, please. So with that, we'll jump into the step 2 proposal. Any questions about the sort of the background and how we got to where we are? All right.
So I want to take just a moment and really ground this conversation about what we're talking about here. And I think the core of the success of the Pathways Initiative is a narrow focus on specifically the market operations that are separate from the myriad of responsibilities that the CAISO has. So on this slide, we really illustrate that the CAISO is responsible for transmission system control and operations, transmission planning, balancing authority functions, reliability coordinations, resource adequacy. And on the very right-hand side, we have energy markets. And while this is a huge deal and very important to stakeholders around the West, it is a single service that the CAISO provides overall. And if we got into the details on the tariff, we could get narrowly focused on sections, I believe, 29 and 33 for the WEIM and the EDAM, with several additional sections that have more of a joint application with the integrated forward market and the real-time dispatch. But again, we're focused here on the energy market components. And one of the foundations that helped the Pathways bring this coalition together was the recognition that an RTO can have more than one balancing authority. An RTO could provide services very separately with a balancing authority functions and the market functions. And this separation really helped our California colleagues feel comfortable that this step around governance was actually creating the kind of parity in balancing authority oversight that the rest of the EIM community has today. PGE runs its own balancing authority. We are responsible for our own balancing authority. And under this proposal, the CAISO board retains responsibility and sole authority over the CAISO balancing authority. And that was, I think, the foundation that helped us build on the rest of the recommendations that we have on our next slide. Yes.
I heard the acronym RTO. Did you mean RO, or I'm trying to?
So I did actually, we used MISO as an example early on in our research to understand that when the MISO system was first established, all of the balancing authorities were retained, and the MISO as the independent system operator was the ISO for all of those balancing authorities. And even today, MISO retains what they call a local BA. And so while there is a single control area, the kind of classic utilities in MISO retain a lot of their balancing authority responsibilities. And this is the model that we could help envision that last criteria from the state letter that while we're not doing this today, we are setting up an organization that can evolve into the future to offer a diverse array of services if stakeholders seek out those services. So today, stakeholders are asking for an energy market and an extended day ahead market. They're not asking for balancing authority consolidation or transmission operations, but we could, in this long-term evolution on step 3, envision an organization that could evolve to offer those services over the long term, and based on our learning and understanding of the evolution of some of the Eastern markets. We also use options and steps that are two. They're both two. So
And many pathways, many pathways. We needed a whole, we need a whole new thesaurus for this work. All right, so we're going to walk through all of the elements of the step 2 draft proposal. We had at the beginning of this very long document a summary of all of the recommendations, and we'll highlight a handful of those. We'll talk about the proposal for the scope and function of the new RO. We'll talk about the formation and sort of place of business and where we want to incorporate it. A summary of some of the governance recommendations, our very intense focus on protecting the public interest, and then we'll talk about the proposal for the stakeholder process as well. Next slide, please. So at a high level, some of the key recommendations that this proposal includes is starting with what we have called option 2.0. Option 2.0, we basically, the evaluation over the last few months has been, should we start at 2.0 or 2.5? There's a pretty significant difference between the two. 2.0 is the more minimal structural recommendation. It's not a public utility. It's really a policy setting organization that really has oversight over the market rules for the EIM and EDAM, but all of the operations of those markets still sits with the CAISO. We are recommending that the RO board, once it is seated, take on a feasibility analysis of what would we need to do to continue to evolve this structure, to be able to take on more independence, to take on more responsibility and liability, and what are those costs? What would that look like? How would that affect the relationship between the RO and the CAISO? So doing that analysis once we have this thing set up. Again, I think part of the goal here was to be able to get something off the ground, to keep costs minimal, and take very incremental steps, which is something that has had a lot of success for the West. It's getting people comfortable with continued progress, but with an eye towards something much bigger and an actual, sort of idea of what that path might look like. But again, this longer term vision continues to be rooted in a voluntary basis. This is a really important piece of this. This is no one is forcing anyone to join an RTO. No one is forcing anyone to give up more than they need to give up. And no one's forcing them to participate in anything they don't want to. As utilities and stakeholders need to continue to evolve, thinking about the statutory requirement in Nevada for the utilities to join an RTO by 2030, we have to be able to have a path to that. And so this is really creating that foundation as part of the recommendation, but starting off with something that's bite-sized, if you will. Next slide, please. Or do you cover this one? Sure. Yeah. Really, at this point, we could do either one, I think.
So under option 2.0, which is our day one organization, the regional organization will assume full sole authority over the Western Energy Imbalance Market and the extended day ahead market rules and have sole Section 205 rights. And that is specifically those two tariff sections that I mentioned in the previous slide. We will continue to have a single integrated tariff and with a recommended process to continue to really reorganize that tariff to help delineate those areas of shared sole or sole RO, shared or joint authority, and sole CAISO authority to help clarify that as the market evolves. We recommend market operations. All of the day-to-day operations of the market will be performed by the CAISO under a contract for services, and the CAISO will remain a counterparty for existing contracts. These are options that help reduce the administrative challenges of standing up and migrating to the RO, and helps with the ease of transition for a day one organization. The CAISO staff will retain emergency operational authority, much like they do today, to handle situations as they arise. And we estimate from a budgetary perspective that the year one costs will be about $1.25 to $1.5 million, and that those costs could increase as the RO grows into the recommendations, especially around some of the public interest and stakeholder engagement that we recommend here, but that we would start out with those incremental costs to help really facilitate the ease of startup and the transition to the regional organization. Next slide, please. Oh, sure. Under option 2.5, once that the idea here is that we will plant a seed. The launch committee, under our voluntary handout raised budget, has basically the capability, thank you, Jim, to really develop a seed of an organization. And we will, we're working with stakeholders and with you to plant the seed into fertile soil and to help water it and help it to grow. But we do envision that as this organization takes root, that it will grow into what we call option 2.5. Well, it will have expanded authority and take on the actual responsibility, and including a lot of the liability and compliance obligations associated with running the market, that it will become a public utility under FERC's jurisdiction, and that it will be able to have its own separate tariff for the services under its sole authority. With this growth, it can take on the vendor contract and other contracts with market participants more directly, and become that counterparty to those contracts in order to really have the authority over the authority with the market participants and over the market rules. This is the sleepy time section of our proposal. There is a lot of one of the real challenges. I think we heard from a lot of our stakeholders that option 2.5 is preferable, that they like the real the accountability that comes with option 2.5. But those are the challenges that we just articulated here around having the reserve fund for liability, doing some of the administrative work around contracts and the tariff. These are transitional items that will need to be done carefully and with significantly more professionally staffed resources than what the launch committee can offer on day one. And so we estimate that as the RO takes on this additional responsibility, that its budget would be more extensive. It would have especially more legal and staffing services, and that budget could grow up to about $25 million. Next slide, please.
I had to let Pam talk about this because I butchered her plant analysis yesterday. I ended up in a tropical plant reference. It didn't work. So Pam did much better than I did. So what we're recommending really about the formation of this new regional organization is that it would be a 501c3. We really looked at a handful of different corporate structures and landed on a recommendation for a 501c3 nonprofit for a couple of reasons. The tax exempt status keeps costs down, enables additional kinds of financing for the organization. But one of the really key parts about this was having this rooted in public benefit. So thinking about the public interest really being protected in all aspects of this organization, even in its 501c3 status, was a really important part of that analysis. We also were weighing in this particular set of work the real and perceived independence. And so thinking about even where we incorporate the regional organization, thinking about, does it have to be incorporated in California? Is there more comfort for stakeholders that this is not just another California organization if we incorporate it somewhere else. Delaware has really a very well-developed body of corporate law, and there's a lot of benefits to incorporating organizations there. And so we thought that because it makes sense from a corporate structure to incorporate in Delaware, and because you have that added perception of independence, that this made sense for our recommendation for where to incorporate the RO. As far as the place of business, though, it does not make sense for it to be located in Delaware. So we decided that this was another area where we really gave it a lot of thought. We got input from people that were like, well, it would be good to be able to have a principal place of business outside of California, put it somewhere else in the West. But because of the relationship between the RO and the CAISO, the launch committee decided that it made a lot more sense for the new RO to be located in close proximity to the CAISO. And so while we're really leaving this up to the RO board to decide where they want to have the principal place of business, we feel pretty strongly that locating in Folsom or in that vicinity will help facilitate a more functional relationship between the RO and the CAISO. Board meetings, as you all do now, will continue to be able to move around the West, and we can actually go in and make sure that we are really showing up in the states that are participating in this market and able to have more access to stakeholders. Next slide, please. It's like we're using my computer. It's frozen all the time these days. As far as governance goes, we're recommending that we create a 7-member board. So we got a lot of input we had a lot of conversations about the size of the board, and recognizing that the current WEM governing body is 5. We felt that because this is going to be taking on this sole authority and having more, I guess, responsibility over the market operations or the governance of those markets, that we needed to increase the size of the board to start. We had people recommend that we had many more. We had lots of conversations about efficiencies. I agree, small is better. Yep. But to start with 7, we felt was a good number, not too big, not too small, enables a lot of diverse experience to be embedded within that body. We also decided there would be no reserved seats on the board for any sectors or any given people. However, we also think it's really important that we provide a much easier path for the current WEM governing body members to participate on this RO board if they so desire. And so making sure that they go straight to the interview process rather than having to go through a whole application process like other applicants would, was something that was really important. I think we heard it from some of you. We heard it from some of the members of the launch committee who've served on the nominating committee. And so wanting to make sure that we are starting from a place where we've got some institutional knowledge and experience was really important. We're recommending creating a public policy committee, which is a committee of the board that would be tasked with engaging with representatives from states, public power, and the federal PMAs as proposed tariff changes and initiatives come forward to do that check to see if there's any parts of these proposals that could adversely impact those local, state, or federal policies. And so having that very specific call out before the board adopts something that would result in a tariff change was something that was really important in our public interest conversations. Certainly, we're going to have open meetings and transparent decision-making. We'll have access for remote participation. Really thinking about how we can make this a very accessible process was something that was also very important. We want the RO board and the CAISO board to have a collaborative relationship and the ability to have joint meetings for those matters that are joint authority. This would not be This would not be a CAISO balancing authority kind of conversation. This would be on those issues where there is joint authority. We're going to create a formation committee of the launch committee, probably early next year. Pam and I need a vacation, to really start to work on what this transition might look like and what do the articles of incorporation look like, and to seat a nominating committee to be able to get that initial board in place. So some of those activities are things that can happen concurrent to the legislative session. We can draft up some of those articles of incorporation. We can draft board, board job descriptions, but we're not actually proposing to incorporate the new RO or seat a board until after the legislative session is over and hopefully a bill is passed that enables the goal of the RO to happen. From a startup funding standpoint, we're going to need some. We have an open application for some funding from the Department of Energy. Hopefully we'll find that out in the next month or so. We will likely continue to fundraise from sort of the broader West to get some of these initial costs set up so that we can get the RO off the ground sometime soon. So the next piece we want to talk through is the public interest piece. The public interest, oh yeah, does anybody need a jumping jacks or anything? We are right after lunch too. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, there is a whole section in the paper on this. I am not remembering the exact details on that, but we can get that section reference and send it to you. We recognize there will need to be recommendations around the classification of each initiative around its decisional authority. And there will need to be an ability to have both boards weigh in effectively on that decisional classification. I can't remember the exact mechanisms that we're recommending right now.
It seems like at some point, there has to be some final decision authority on authority. And it's not obvious to me. Okay, that's one. The other is budget separation. Can you say a little bit more about how that works? And we know the revenue sources right now of CAISO and how that gets divided.
So on day one, we do not recommend, we recommend startup funding. We hope to get a grant for startup funding.
Right.
We recognize that there will be a runway before the RO is able to have tariff-based funding. We also are clear that we do not recommend the transfer of any staff or funding from CAISO to the RO under option 2.0. There could be evolution there in the future, but on day one, we think the RO's funding will be completely separate than the CAISO funding today.
And will not tap any of the current CAISO revenue sources? Is that what you're thinking? I'm just trying to understand. It seems like there is a pool. I'm not talking about the cost side. I'm talking about the revenue side. There is a pool of revenue right now that runs the EIM and CAISO. And I could see lots of interpretations all the way up to the EIM is now the entire real-time market of the West. And so all of that revenue should go to EIM, which would be a lot of money. So I guess it's not clear.
I think we would have to do a cost of service study in order to really get those dollars clear. The CAISO runs a GMC study on a triannual basis. And we recommend that that study be conducted before the RO, like while the RO is having in its startup funding period, so that that separation and cost allocation can be done more with the kind of input and expertise from stakeholders, the organization, and financial analysts.
Thanks.
Okay, so this is probably a dumb question that I should have asked, but I have my mic on. I should have asked this a long time ago, and I'm trying to find what slide it's in. Oh, it's on the summary of recommendations slide, and I don't know what slide that is. But under the long-term vision, the RO will be able to offer on a voluntary basis any additional services desired by Western stakeholders. And it says, while California will likely not have the authority to participate, that it could at some point. So when you say California, I mean, what does that mean? Does that mean the investor-owned utilities or the PTOs of California? Does that mean the state of California making a decision like the CPUC? What does that mean, California? A little more specificity on what that means.
Sure. So this is really, I think, driving at some of the legislative work that we are envisioning to enable the RO to have sole authority over the market rules, but that does not impact the legislation that requires the CAISO to be the provider of all of the other services to the right of the word market on that slide. But the RO could offer those services separately to parties that are not currently participating transmission owners in the CAISO. So in theory, I think bank could take another service, but PG&E is part of the CAISO PTO cohort. And so what we're here trying really to articulate here is that our path towards the RO continues to maintain the legislative protections under the current CAISO board and current CAISO governance process for all of the functions, the retained functions, including the balancing authority and transmission planning and generator interconnection and RA capacity rules that we intend to have be retained. And that there will need to be for California to, in our long-term vision, so like 2040, 2045, when, we've got our 2BA system in the West and everyone's operating in harmony, and and the magic of reciprocity. I call it the magic of reciprocity. I think people get a little frustrated with me when I do this because it is magic. But under the energy markets, even today in the EIM, the way that we manage transmission through a full network model that is common among all of the balancing authorities, and we're able to apply security constrained economic dispatch on top of that full network model, means that the kind of seams that occur between balancing authorities in the East are not present in the energy markets that are operated today by the CAISO. And so we can envision that we can achieve these longer term benefits while continuing to have the CAISO board autonomy over the services that continue to remain foundational to the CAISO participants and the CAISO, our California community members, but also enable the RO to offer these services on a voluntary basis to stakeholders in the West who are seeking those services. And so we think we have, but if all in this in this world, we still have California with that retained authority under the legislation language that would not be changed without further legislation passing.
Basically, we didn't want, I've had Pam explain that to me 1,000 times. I still don't understand it. But essentially, we're only authorizing the CAISO to give up its authority over the market services. And so if the CAISO wanted to consolidate its balancing authority or consolidate some kind of transmission operations sometime in the future, we're gonna have to come back to the legislature and ask for permission to do that.
Okay. I don't know why I'm having trouble grasping this. So your PG&E, where do you get your market services from once we have an RO?
Still the CAISO.
So the CAISO is running its market for California and the RO.
It's all one market. The markets, the EIM and EDAM are not changing.
It's just, okay.
It's just the governance over those.
Okay.
So the RO will have governance over the rules for the market and a vendor relationship with CAISO to operate the market. Does that help?
I thought I knew the answer and it didn't go the direction I thought it was going. There is one Western imbalance market right now, and it includes California and a lot of the rest of the West. That would still be one. There will be an EDAM, which will be one day ahead market.
Yes.
And that will include California and everything else.
Yes.
Both of those markets will be run by the RO.
Yes.
Okay, this one. And they will be they will be governed by they will not be run by, they will be run by the ISO. But in a sense, PG&E will get its market services from the organization that is governed by the RO.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, public interest. This is the exciting part of the proposal.
There were some feisty conversations. But the public interest really was one of the most important aspects of what we talked about. And really, I think thinking about, because right now there are public interest protections in the statute for California stakeholders through the markets. Changing this statute made it very important for us to have a conversation about how are we ensuring that that consumers in California and the rest of the West are protected through the structure that we're recommending. So that was really part of the driver behind this work. We identified two main components for how we are defining public interest, while not getting too specific and letting each state really kind of define it further if they want. But at a high level, when we're talking about public interest, we're talking about consumer interests, including affordability and reliability, and we're talking about the state, local, and federal policies and how they are respected in market design. So those are really the two kind of drivers for these public interest tools that we're going to kind of talk through. We had identified these really even in our step one, and this was part of the recommended language for evolving the WEM governing body charter to include more of this public interest language. And so that has fed into the work that we're doing in step two. Next slide, please. So we identified tools, again, across the entire spectrum of the RO, thinking about including public interest experience in the qualifications for serving on the board, maintaining the BOSSR as it is today, which was something that ended up one of our more feisty conversations. But I think really because the BOSSR functions well and the regulators who participate on that, and even public power liaisons and PMA liaisons feel that it is a structure that is working well, we're recommending keeping the BOSSR intact and maintaining its all of the way it runs today. We're recommending creating a consumer advocate organization, which will be a separate 501c3 that will help facilitate engagement with the consumer advocate offices across the West, and help provide additional resources to some, pretty understaffed and under-resourced offices, but making sure that they have the ability to organize and get better information and participate in a more meaningful way. We're recommending creating an Office of Public Participation, which was kind of modeled off after the FERC Office of Public Participation. And this is really designed, again, to help facilitate access and participation for the public, being able to kind of translate some of these things and do education, as well as help people understand what the process is to engage. So this was something that we thought would be a benefit to many stakeholders across the West. We have some recommendations around the independent market monitor. This is actually an area where we still have some work and discussion to do. We've got some different ideas, and I think there's still some more in-depth conversations that need to be had, given the relationship between the RO and the CAISO, and trying to figure out how are we ensuring that those market monitor functions are maintained in the right places, and that we've got the right involvement and oversight from the right bodies. So those are, I think, an area of still some open questions for us. But this was something that we felt very strongly was a very valuable component, and one that we want to continue to see operate into the new RO future. And then we have some public interest protections included into the stakeholder process, and Pam will walk through the stakeholder process next. But really, we've been trying to find a good balance for being able to provide an accessible process where people can meaningfully engage with a lot of transparency. And I think building on the pieces of stakeholder processes that we've seen across the entire country, the pieces that people really like, the pieces that are meaningful and make people feel like their voices are being heard and counted and reported and really part of the decision-making process once you get to that point. So with that.
Yeah. All right. So right now we have the Department of Market Monitoring, which I sort of can think of as a consumer protection organization. And we have the governing body, or the EIM, Independent Market Advisor. The proposal is to keep both of those, plus add a new organization that is the Consumer Protection EIM organization. Is that right?
No. The Consumer Advocate Organization is okay. So the Consumer Advocate Organization is a separate 501c3 that would be fully independent from the RO or from CAISO.
No, I understand that, but it would have a budget, and I'm just thinking now we have 3 of these organizations, and I'm trying to figure out why we need to, the Western consumers, need to pay for 3 separate organizations.
So Severin, if I may, the market expert is not a consumer advocate, and they're not there to look out for the consumers. They're an education function for our board only. So so the market expert would not be part of this consumer anything.
Okay, the Department of Market Monitoring, I do think of as consumer advocate.
Well, so FERC Order 719 governs the role of the market monitor. And I would say that FERC sees the market monitor as its eyes and ears on the ground for FERC enforcement. And while FERC does give market monitors the ability, and California state law gives consumer advocates and the state commission the ability to work directly with the market monitor and get data from the market monitor, the primary purpose of the market monitor is to meet FERC's criteria as established in Order 719. So the idea for the Office of Consumer Advocate is that we have a number of every state around the West, except for Idaho, has designated an office in their own state to be a voice for the consumer advocate or for the consumers, for small commercial and residential customers in state utility proceedings for that state. And as the market grows, the role of the market, the energy market costs grow proportionately. And so it becomes more important for these state agencies to be able to engage directly in the formation of the market rules themselves. So the Department of Market Monitoring is advisory and has oversight authority of the markets and could participate, but is its own independent body that is represented in the stakeholder process. And so the idea for the consumer advocate organization is that it would be creating a central organization for consumer advocates to also directly participate specifically in the stakeholder process, not to do market oversight or market evaluation, but to be the voice of the consumer in the stakeholder process specifically. And so that is something that was adapted in PJM. There's the organization of PJM states. And I think consumer advocates have really appreciated that enhanced participation and education engagement opportunity by being able to advocate for their customers, their residential and small commercial customers in the stakeholder process itself. And so I do think that there are significant differences between the role of the market monitor around enforcement and overall market efficiency, and the ability to have the voice of the residential and small commercial customer represented and as an advocacy organization in the stakeholder process itself.
Okay.
Sure.
I want to go on record with something that our profound apologies. We are at a distinct disadvantage that the 128 pages that you released today, we have not been able to read, though I've now read a cursory amount of it. And it strikes me that our fiduciary responsibilities are such that, you know, that we would have time to, I wish this was reverse order, that we had been allowed to read this first and then have you here. So I would just say two things. One is that we need to understand better the liability, and there's quite a few pages on that and what you're suggesting in both 2.0 and 2.5, and that legally we're at a distinct disadvantage right now about what we can and can't do and how this would impact us. And to Severin's point about the budget, you know, we have no idea what the implications of that might be to our current budget. But with all that said, without sounding too much like a wet blanket, which I'm sure I just did, we are very pro creating a Western energy market, okay? But you can understand our situation as board members, that we have a fiduciary responsibility to California and to the CAISO, so that I'm just sorry that we didn't get a chance to read this first.
So we are at the start of this process. We will get to, I think, the next steps and go through the detailed pieces. And I apologize, we should have started with this, but I think you guys are used to seeing final proposals that are up for a vote. And this is not a final proposal. We are taking feedback. We are here to offer an overview of our 133-page document and help kind of hopefully give you enough grounding to be able to parse through that and to, you know, bring us your feedback. We do have a number of different engagement points, but we do not intend to have a final proposal until mid-November. So still a very long, or not very long, it'll feel shorter than it is, but that we are at a step in the process that I think does not come to you as the board on a frequent basis. And so apologies if that disconnect doesn't feel right, but I hope that you are able to take the time and that we will have enough
No,
time.
no,
for
I
you to
think it should
process.
be somewhat of an iterative process for all the questions you're getting now. So, that's our distinct disadvantage. So I just want to.
Okay, stakeholder process. Other questions? Stacy, how are we doing on time?
We're a little bit over on time, but I don't know how many minutes.
Almost
Okay,
done.
yeah,
Just a couple
Thank
more.
you.
So the stakeholder process was one of the most important elements for our stakeholders that we look at and really take the time to dig into. We appreciate the support that we received from GridWorks that helped facilitate a series of 4 engagement workshops that looked comprehensively at the different stakeholder processes around the country, as well as the CAISO's process and other processes that are known to Western market participants. With those 4 workshops, we invited our stakeholders to share their feedback and their suggestions and their priorities through those workshops, and then took comments on the different elements of the stakeholder process that were important to our stakeholders. And I do want to acknowledge that I think a lot of the work that the CAISO staff has done on the stakeholder process, hearing this feedback over the last several years, has really already initiated that kind of stakeholder-driven evolution that, I mean, we saw earlier today with the demand response proposal and having really stakeholder-driven market evolution. And so while we did do a very comprehensive evaluation, I think the CAISO has been racing right behind us to pick up and incorporate a lot of these ideas. And so here, what we're offering is really, I think, some enhancements to processes that are continuing to evolve with that kind of feedback today. Next slide, please. So, I never know. I always, we got to work on this one. But the 3 elements of the stakeholder process are really around issue identification. Actually, can we go back a slide? I realized that this was not my longer set of slides, and this is really the elements that we're talking about here. So our first recommendation is that the Regional Issues Forum evolve into what we're calling the Stakeholder Representatives Committee, or SRC. We'll have a new acronym. And this is really to ensure or to help drive home the role of the SRC as helping to elevate voices from within each of the sectors to better understand and articulate sector-based perspectives as market tariff proposals evolve. We are working on defining sectors and the voting process. One of the areas that we have called out in our proposal for further evaluation, and we will have a separate workshop on this, is getting the definitions of the sectors right. It's one of the areas we received the most feedback on, and it's clear that we need to have additional further conversations before specifically defining the sectors in our final recommendation. We go through a series of classification of stakeholder initiatives. We're bringing back the classification process into compliance initiatives around FERC compliance or other mandatory compliance around exigent circumstances. We have included a new category that we call compliance with state or local public policy. We see the need to have, if the market has to adapt to enable a state's public policy to take effect, like Oregon's CAP program that we are currently working through the stakeholder process, we are identifying that as a compliance initiative. As PGE, we have to comply with our state law by 2030, and we appreciate working with the market to have that evolution take place. Part of that, though, is an evaluation that the rules to implement that state's public policy will not adversely affect other states. And so we have a counterbalance to the enhancement of those initiatives to be compliance-based, but recommend additional criteria and protections to ensure that that one state's public policy does not adversely impact another. We then go through the stakeholder process, which is the diagram on the next slide. So as we have the annual catalog road mapping process today, we recommend an enhanced role for the Stakeholder Representatives Committee to really work with their stakeholders to do a lot of the prioritization and ranking of initiatives in the discretionary category. We, I think, went through the first round of this year and really offer some detailed recommendations on ways to enhance that process going forward. Once we have gone through that cataloging and roadmap process and have a roadmap for the organization to run through the stakeholder process, we identify that there are really two types of initiatives. One type is, or a stage one initiative is where there's a conception or an idea that an area of the market design needs to be enhanced, but there are not clear problem statements or clear solutions that stakeholders have brought forward for consideration. This would be something like price formation, where there was an agreement to evaluate price formation in the CAISO market, but not have, that weren't a set of clear recommendations on what to do about price formation. Greenhouse gas compliance for cap states is another example. I think there's a gas working group as well, but these are really the working group processes where stakeholders will work directly with RO staff or market staff to do the research and to define the problem statements that can move forward into a stage two stakeholder process where that problem statement is clear and we have a more formalized staff-led process that really drives the initiative towards a vote by the board. What we really tried to do and balance in our recommendation here is elevate the voice of the stakeholder so that stakeholders feel that their perspectives and their needs are being addressed by the market while maintaining the nimbleness of the CAISO process to address issues as they come up. I think we had acknowledgement earlier today. I can't remember who said it, but someone remarked on how quickly we went from problem statement to solution in the DR proposal. We want to maintain that as, I think, a unique characteristic of the CAISO stakeholder process, where there is the ability to quickly address issues as they emerge, and to be able to be responsive to conditions as they come up through the market design process. And with that, I think we can go to our final slide.
So just wanted to quickly walk through the next steps. So today, we released the draft proposal to the world, and we are giving stakeholders 4 weeks to provide written comments. We're going to have a public workshop next Friday on the 4th to walk through this proposal for the stakeholders. We're going to have a workshop on the 7th where we really just dive into a conversation around sectors and helping and having a conversation that is based on what we anticipate these sectors actually doing, and therefore what the sectors should actually be. We're going to have, so public comments are going to be due on the 25th. We're going to need to take a few weeks to incorporate that feedback and refine this proposal. We'll be doing that really between now and then as well. There's a handful of open issues that we're going to be able to continue to work on. But the goal is to put out a final proposal on November 15th, have another public meeting where we take a vote, and have another opportunity for public comment. And then at that point, we'll create the formation committee to help start to get this thing off the ground. I think it's important. One of the things that's really been that we've reminded ourselves and that has been important to the work that we're doing is that we're an advisory body. We don't have the control to do anything. So at this point, while we can go and incorporate a new entity and help identify who those board members are, a lot of this is going to be handed to the new RO and the new board to say, here's our recommendations. do with it what you will. And so we recognize that we're handing them a pretty baked set of recommendations and ideas, but that they will continue to evolve as the circumstances evolve, as we continue to get stakeholder input. So I think it's an important, we have to remind ourselves that this is, that we're a group of volunteers. But that we've put a lot of time and effort into this. So the formational committee will be working over the course of next year. There will hopefully be a bill that gets run in the legislature to enable this. And then we will kind of see where we get at that point and get this thing off the ground.
Thank you both. Information. Yep. Happy.
Kathleen? And Pam, I have a question. Again, it wasn't covered here in the slides. How do you envision the staff, even though minimal staff of the RO at least to begin with, and CAISO staff? I mean, do you see it somewhat as an extension? And the reason why I'm asking that is one of the unique characteristics with CAISO is the relationships they have with staff from each of the BAs, and I'll say customizing solutions, helping them work through issues, and I'll say resolving problems. Is the thought is if those things in the future are coming up, are they going through RO staff, and then that staff works with CAISO? Is the thought is that the relationship that's currently out there with the BA staff working directly with CAISO staff and just informing RO staff, or generally how was that envisioned?
So again, for option 2.0, we do not see any transfer of staff between the CAISO and the RO, which I think implies or it inherently means that all of the work that CAISO staff do today on this engagement and relationship building with their customers, which is incredibly valuable and very much appreciated, will continue to be run by CAISO staff. We do envision that the RO will ultimately have a small set of staff that will help advise the RO about the proposals that are brought to it by CAISO staff. And so there is a kind of a connection between the maintaining the processes as they are today and how they're working today, with enabling the RO to have a kind of evaluation role to enable and enhance that independence, so that there is that opportunity for direct stakeholder engagement with the CAISO staff in the same process as it would be today, but also to kind of have maybe an ombudsman relationship through the RO around ensuring that independence, and that there aren't any that the interests are being represented carefully and balanced appropriately between the California and other party interests around the West.
Yeah, I can see where it's hard to define in any great detail, and it's going to start at some point, and it'll be a lot of learning.
Planting a
involved.
seed. We're planting a seed.
Yeah, planting seed. So you don't see, and I'm thinking more in the execution, not in the development. Like with any rule, right? They're never absolutely perfect, and some require structural fixes, some require some modifications, others require ways in which each entity can work with them. And maybe it's the development of a tool, maybe it's an adjustment of a process or protocol. And so you say that at least initially, no change. Once things are in place, and the over time, as the RO takes on more responsibility, that there be probably a little bit of a migration. But you're envisioning, there might be some type of ombudsman element within there who stays engaged to make certain that everybody is fair and honest, and it's visible to everybody. Okay.
It's on. Thank you. I think we're gonna thank you so much for taking the time to do this information relay. As you said, a draft, proposal. There is quite a bit of time
Stacy,
for
could I make a
comments.
comment before
Oh,
we close
okay.
out? Let's, sorry.
Yep.
We don't have little signs to hold up or little, I'll hold my hand like we're online.
Sorry.
So, I just wanted, well, first off, I want to thank you for the extensive work that you all have done and for your volunteerism, as you mentioned, in taking this on. I suspect you knew you were in for it, and it's probably proven to be true, but thank you for all of that effort and all of the members of the launch committee, because I know this is a major undertaking and you've made enormous progress in a very short time. And you still have, to me, a very aggressive schedule ahead of you. I feel obligated because we're on the record today to at least say that you cannot take silence for assent right now from the ISO Board of Governors. We need to read what you've given us and understand it. And from my perspective, just as one board member, I will say that we are being asked here to make a fairly significant transfer of decision-making authority. And yet it looks to me, in looking at the proposal, like the responsibility and liability for implementing it is still going to remain with the ISO. And the lawyer in me immediately goes, wait. So I think we're going to need to get some help to think our way through that, to make sure we understand what responsibility is remaining with the ISO, what the involvement is when we have tariff decisions being made by one organization but being implemented by another. I already have cornered my old pal Jim Shetler to talk about how Bank and SMUD make this work, because I think there are examples where this is being done and it's being done successfully. But nonetheless, I feel obligated on the record to go ahead and flag for you that I think we have some homework now to do at the ISO board level to kind of think through what you've given us. And I know you've put a huge amount of work into it, so we will also do our due diligence and get going on reviewing what you've given us. But I do want to thank you for all of the effort that went into it. Thank you.
Thank you. You'll indulge me for just one moment. While the entirety of the launch committee, all 26 members, have done an enormous amount of work to bring this proposal to you today, none of them have done quite as much work as Kathleen. And so on behalf of the launch committee, we have procured a day at the spa for you. Thank you for all of the many hours and the learnings and the cat herding and the writing and the editing and the revising. We would not be here without your leadership and bringing us all together. So thank you, Kat. It is a
people willing to put in a lot of time. With everybody else has real day jobs. Mine, I sort of make up as I go along. But it really, truly, this has been an amazing amount of collaboration, and I have learned something new every single day. And it has, and had to dig deep for patience occasionally. But really, it has been one of the most rewarding experiences I've ever had. So thank you.
Okay, don't go anywhere. We're going to try public comment now too. If anybody in the room has any public comment, please come forth. Seeing none, let's open it up at least to the Zoom and phone participants, please, Michelle.
As a reminder, to enter the public comment queue, please click your raise hand icon. And if you're on the phone, please press #2 to enter the queue. Please state your name and affiliation before making your comment. I see no one in the queue for public comment.
All right, thank you. Thank you both. Moving on to the last item then of the day, we're going to have a presentation for the Arizona State University Climate Plan. To kick this topic off, I'm going to turn the platform over to Governor Mary Leslie.
Thank you. Well, I just want to take a moment to remind us all that we're here in Tempe, Arizona, and we're sitting in the middle of the ASU campus. And we are, I guess, the guests of Michael Crow, their president. And today we have Professor Nathan Johnson with us. And I think the professor is going to talk to us about what ASU is doing to accelerate the advancement of sustainable development goals through innovation and stakeholder value propositions in the areas of technology, business models, and policy. And I think we also should note that ASU was one of the first I believe the first university to have a degree in sustainability and is always ranked #1, as my husband reminds me, in the United States.
10 years recently.
10 years in a row. Okay, with that, Professor Johnson.
Fantastic. And thank you, board, for giving me the opportunity to represent Arizona State University, some of the work we do. And as I talk about the efforts, the goals, the plans, the people, and the processes, you'll see that we are definitely an organization that does what we believe in and lives what it is on campus as well as off campus. So, other way. There we go. Perfect. Thank you. A little bit about Arizona State University. We are a public institution, and our intent and our mission, our values are in how do we create public impact or benefit to society. And over the past few centuries, we've seen universities continue to do a great job of producing degrees, but degrees isn't the only thing that we should be doing, particularly since the half-life of education is now 5 years. That simply producing a bachelor's, master's, or PhD is insufficient to meet the public demand of the public impact. We're the largest university in the United States, 181,000 students, first school of sustainability. We also, when it comes to the energy transition, have 50 megawatts of solar PV, 25 on campus through PPA, 25 off campus as a sleeve PPA. We also have a CT gas turbine that is a prime power for 3 of our critical research facilities, including some biosafety activities we do on behalf of the federal government. And we're increasingly decarbonizing and advancing our Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 goals on campus, as well as internationally. When it comes to how we project that thought and that experience in those partnerships internationally, we have about $100 to about $130 million a year in research, development, and demonstration, including about 1,500 people on campus that drive these international partnerships. And when I think about that work we do and our motivations, it often comes back down to these 6 driving forces. And whether you're thinking about load growth in Arizona, for some utilities grew 7% last year, compound interest, you think about that 10 years down the road, that means we need to have double of what we have today. We just don't build stuff that fast enough. We can't even access or procure stuff that fast enough. But it's not just the load growth in the United States due to data centers, TSMC, and others, but also internationally where I work, accelerating the energy access for 700 million people that don't have power. And then how do we translate these macro needs and perspectives, as well as the small ones in the communities, and support their community development to connect everyone in a global economy that's thriving, resilient, and more. So the way we break this down, noting that we need to do more than just produce degrees, is solutions brokering, master planning, project development, standard research, demonstration, and training, capacity building. Just to give you a perspective of how we align ourselves to provide services that go beyond what you typically see in a university. Now, with some of this work, I'm an engineer, but I was also trained as an anthropologist, and I practiced in business development and did corporate ventures for a while. Yes, you see at the middle, we do design systems, products, goods, and services that can be regulated, they can be sold, they can be traded, they can be monetized. But the aspects around it are where a lot of our institution gets extremely involved with, not just engineering, but the policy side, the business model, and more that can be co-architected together to allow typical folks, utilities, customers, regulators, and vendors to work together in new ways by having a broader expansion of the problem. One example of that is in supporting the state of Arizona in their decarbonization goals. And so myself and one of my colleagues, Laura Keeler, drive this effort. So it's a 4-year effort. It's about 30% complete, 5 working groups, electrification, transportation, buildings, and others, hundreds of people involved, and then developing measures by the request and financial support of the US EPA to coordinate the many efforts within a state that have similar goals that can be synergistic and have a potential to be overlapping or not necessarily in conflict, but more value to be generated by the coordination of those together. And of course, as well, there's a significant amount of effort in prioritizing low income and disadvantaged communities for cleaner air. And so if this helps is that master planning, how do we get to 2050, and noting as well with load growth hastening rapidly in the state, how do we facilitate the economic development, but then also not distance ourselves from our core goals as well of sustainability and a low carbon future? Some of what we've done to illustrate some of the ways that ASU works in public-private partnerships. This is just one of the partners that I have, noting I'm one person doing energy at Arizona State, is we used $2 million of a mix of federal funds and investment funds. And now we've turned that into $134 million of implementation build-it funds. That's a mix of public and private capital for 50 megawatts of plant capacity. The intent of this also is realizing that feed designs, so front-end engineering designs, the distribution microgrids could be 20% of overall project costs. When you get to larger scale transmission systems and more, those might be low to mid 8 figures. And so they're just really darn expensive. And we also realize that we can't take months any more, potentially years, to do that front-end engineering design. We really need to be doing it in weeks. And with this partnership, we're able to do it sometimes in the standpoint of a single afternoon, as well as with real-time simulation showing the potential of what we can do in a room like this. So if we take some of those thoughts, we're increasingly getting asked to develop and expand that thinking above 69 kV, which is where my team has primarily worked for the past 10 years, realizing that we can't build generation and transmission to handle the speed of which economic development is progressing today, onshoring, data centers, manufacturing, and others. So now what could take, a year for a transmission analysis and planning project, being able to do that in the matter of a couple of weeks is our next objective. Now, if we combine this and think about also the market side, we're starting to, within the state of Arizona, a few weeks ago, I was with some of the DOE leadership, utility CEOs, as well as tribal nation leadership and flag staff, talking about negative pricing from California. I think it's about 10 to 12% per year right now coming from California, but also there's other sections of the United States that face negative pricing due to market dynamics. And so it'd be great to be able to capture some of that and then also start to create situations where that allows us overall to have lower day ahead real-time pricing, but then also translate that benefit off to the retail customers. So this effort is an NSS supported effort. I think it's $184 million over the next 5 years to advance energy and create an ecosystem within the Southwest Sustainability Innovation Engine. And on the right, you can't, have a professor come up here and not have a little bit of charts and graphs, right? So it just shows you a little bit of lithium ion storage versus long duration energy storage. And if you make it cheap enough, if you have thermal energy stored in concrete or whatever else might be, you could get a levelized cost of storage of 2 to 3 cents. Now, what's interesting there is that the landscape is shifting, because before it was, let's go more efficient, conserve more efficient. Lithium chemistry is getting to 85, 90, 95, and lithium ferrophosphate right now at 98%. Phenomenal, but it comes at a cost. So that becomes valuable if the cost of energy is really high. But now you can have a levelized cost or a PPA agreement for large scale solar south of 2 cents. So, and then with the negative pricing, if it essentially and sometimes doesn't cost you anything, it doesn't really matter if you lose 50% of it. You want to be able to retain that benefit. And that's what we're finding with the long duration energy storage is it's not just about how do you displace natural gas peaker plants when you get to 80% renewables. It's how do you save and utilize the electrons that would otherwise be wasted, or potentially you could make money out taking off someone else's hands. Looking as well in terms of energy markets, particularly with FERC 2222 enabling aggregators and access into wholesale markets. We're working with utilities in the Valley and then also the U.S. military to illustrate how microgrids and the National Defense Authorization Act is requiring all federal infrastructure, specifically DoD in this case, to have resilient solutions. Often these are microgrids, somewhere between 5 to about $20 million, each one of them across hundreds of sites, And with a federal allocation of budgets, typically you would have funding for internal electrical systems and external electrical systems coming from different line items managed by different people. And across the 4 branches, also there's different folks internally to those organizations that design and do things differently. So with some of our intellectual property and developed in concert with Climate Tech, they're a Bosch subsidiary, we've been able to deploy these controls, these intelligence at this headquarters of Arizona National Guard, just with the ability, just a small $500 computer, and then that connects out to the existing capital assets that are installed, and we're reducing monthly utility bills by 10 to 20% by better utilization of solar storage, but then also shifting the loads around in the day to shave peak, and then also manage energy use. And of course, that also helps by doing a better job of using the solar and storage, we're enhancing resilience, which is not only a benefit to that installation, but also it reduces our taxpayer obligations on behalf of the U.S. government of supporting energy installations. We've also done this within California. So MCAS Miramar, side note, that was where the original Top Gun was filmed. And so that base has a $20 million microgrid. And there's been times where SDG&E has called on them to activate that microgrid to reduce their net load and sometimes also export during times of high heat. There was no way to capture the monetary benefit of that. So we were contracted by the DoD to do that cost benefit analysis on behalf of them. And then they use that information to file a tariff request with the CPUC to then get a monetary benefit for when they turn on their microgrid, cost money for the federal government. They turn on their microgrid to then benefit the surrounding area. And that's currently in effect right now. A couple more things and I'll stop. Managed charging. So in the state of Arizona, we have a massive interest or growth, I should say, goals for electric vehicles. But if you put that many electric vehicles on the road, charging is going to occur at home without managed charging. The question then becomes which substations are going to turn, reach capacity. I don't think they're going to, get lit on fire, but we're getting to a point where we just don't have enough power out there, right? And so we've looked at across the entire state of Arizona, looked at demographic data, typical adoption trends for EVs based upon different demographic categories, overlaid those onto census tract data, where those folks live, and then how they're connected to the substations to then have an indication of, okay, utility X wants to have 2 million electric vehicles by 2035. Here's a likely distribution. And given your current loading on those substations, where are you going to have thinner ampacity issues for resource adequacy ability at the substation level? One thing also, just a couple of quick things of what we also do. So Sridhar, another colleague of mine at ASU, leads this effort. It's called EPIC-C, about decarbonizing process heat applications. I was just meeting with some of the executives from Pertamina in Indonesia 2 days ago. So that's why Indonesia is still up there. But they have a massive bauxite aluminum industry, and Arizona, as well as multiple parts of the nation here, have their own minerals and processing. And how do you get that heat? It's natural gas, it's coal. And so if you're going to build $1 billion smelter and it's a 30-year return on investment, you better not have any decarbonization goals out to 2050 because you're going to still be paying off that asset. And so we need to make quick work of this problem. And I'm really happy that they are. So a little bit of those colleagues right there, you see on the left a graph that illustrates which thermal processes occur at which temperature. The middle of the traditional process on the right-hand side is the electrified process. It's standard thermodynamics, but it's the coupling of the understanding of renewable energy markets with overall plant design, the electrical engineering, and then the metallurgic processes. You need to look at all at one time to really capture the scope of the value here. A couple more examples and things we're doing. This is with Klaus Lochner and Matt Green, capturing the carbon we can't mitigate. So 2050, great. We got goals to decarbonize when it comes to hard to decarbonize fuels. So hydrocarbons, aviation, maritime, and more. We're probably not going to get there holistically. And so that means we got to do a job of extracting some from the air. And so this is an effort as well, heavily supported by the federal government. Startup businesses Carbon Collect And then there's additional private sector investment of extracting carbon out of the air. The two interesting ways to do this, you can call it passive. And so over on there on the right, that just moves lightly up and down, but doesn't have forced air or fans going across it. When you have forced air convection, that requires a lot of electricity to run these fans. Both of them have their advantages and disadvantages. The forced air, if you can get a process that can be intermittently started and stopped, then when there's negative pricing or low pricing on the wholesale market, you can take advantage of that. And so that's an area that we're very interested in, which might interest you as well. One thing kindly with Amanda Ormond and then Kristen Parrish is looking at a just energy transition. So for places that had coal-fired power plants that have now been decommissioned or will be decommissioned, what is the effect to the tribal communities in terms of revenue loss? So Hopi Tribe is one we work significantly with, 85% revenue loss due to the closure of Navajo Generation Station. Noting they got most of their revenue through Peabody Coal, which is just adjacently placed. We've had, this will be, we've done site visits and all the designs and plans. I think construction will occur sometime late next year, but now we're not just looking at projects that are off grid and I think 10 megawatts of on-grid sites. We're in discussions with projects related to about 80 megawatts in one site, and then another site is 400 megawatts of solar plus storage. And those are getting to a scale that are attracting, of course, large, dense load centers, so data centers and more, but then also at a scale and size where some interaction with the real-time market, depending on the dynamics of how that system's set up, will be beneficial to run through. And we're excited to work closely with Arizona Public Service on thinking through all those remarks. The last thing is that, we're 181,000 students. I think by 2045, if I remember correctly, the number is that we need an additional 20 million people working in the energy sector. That's actually an underestimate because we need to replace people that are retiring as well. And producing people with degrees is not enough, partly due to the speed at which things get outdated from traditional thermodynamics, which is where I was originally classically trained. So we train about 1,000 people a year, executives, managers, operators, and technicians. About a quarter of those are transitioning veterans. About a quarter of them are international, then the other 50% are in the U.S. domestic workforce. And so this is that 1,000 will actually be 2,000 this next year. And by the year after that, it's probably gonna be close to 10,000, as we as a society just can't keep up with the knowledge base that's needed for the changing and new carbon economy. We'll skip over some of these things in case people have any questions. I'll just kind of hop to the end, but a variety of ways that we train folks, including cybersecurity and more. So if you want more details, there's a QR code you can go to and link out to. And then I'm open, here to ask any or answer any questions people might have. Thanks for the time.
Mary, do you want to say anything? Go ahead.
I was going to see if anyone had any questions, which we did.
Just a couple of comments and a couple of questions. So first, thanks, Mary, for organizing this, and Professor Johnson, I know you had a long commute to get here, so thank you. We do really appreciate that. There's some really interesting things here. Don't have a lot of time to get into it. My observation, and maybe this is coming from an engineer, but you're doing a lot of innovative things with existing technology in the way you look at it and put things together. Do you have any interest, or do you look at, and I'm going to give you a couple, the hydrogen hub? I hear a lot about that, green hydrogen. And I saw a presentation at a conference I was at in Washington last week on fusion, which, the university here has probably been involved with. Are you looking at any of those technologies down the road? Because those could be real game changers. These are great and they're good for near term, but what about longer term?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. Me personally, I'm looking at what can be demonstrated and rapidly commercialized to accelerate our progress. I personally am less interested in the last 20% of decarbonization, but we have a lot of colleagues at ASU that work exactly on those topics. Ellen Stetchel, for example, was formerly with Sandia, and she's done a significant amount on solar thermal, hydrogen, water splitting, and more. And there's can't remember the name of it right now, but there is a hydrogen organization that she runs within Arizona and the Southwest. And I'd say also about at universities, a lot of folks are still focused or looking at that next technology. Mine as a systems engineer is working at how it integrates with a broader whole. So thanks for that question.
Yes. Me? Yes. You can decline to respond to this question if you would like. We had a presentation this morning from a panel of state regulators, and it included as one of our speakers, Commissioner Kevin Thompson, who's on the Arizona Corporations Commission. And he made a couple of comments that got my attention. Apparently, the Corporations Commission has a very focused effort on rethinking the responsibilities of utilities in the state of Arizona in terms of supporting various initiatives, which in some cases have been very long-term initiatives. And the two that caught my attention were to withdraw utility support for energy efficiency programs. And the second comment he made was to also withdraw utility support for electric vehicle charging stations. And I just wondered if you have any, in the work that you're doing at Arizona State, are you familiar with the approach that they're taking, and do you have any thoughts on this, or is Arizona thinking about other ways than that these sort of necessary things continue to flourish?
No, I love that question. Thank you so much. On the specifics, that would be great topics to lean into and have an opportunity to hear more information on the perspectives related to those two specific issues.
Right.
So I could speak generally though, in that the what people need, where society is going, and technology is moving so fast that we can't continue to work with each other in the same conventional ways. Is that, you know, if you take a look 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, the way the priorities of businesses or of regulators, or when ISOs were created and more, they were created to fill an emerging need in society. We now have a transition point where our needs and intents are changing, and I would expect that the relationships and how those are formed between utilities, regulators, vendors, and others will also change. And I think that would be, so I think that's a general sense of, I expect them to change. Specifically, it matters on the issue in the locality.
But you see those two things still being supported in Arizona, energy efficiency and charging stations. Historically, all I'm thinking is that utilities have been the backbone of I'll call it pushing those initiatives. And it sounds like there's really a lot of rethinking on that.
Sure. It'd be surprising to me that in some way we as in society wouldn't be advocating for energy efficiency and access to the electrification to help decarbonize.
Right.
What entity takes what role in that? It'd be a bit premature for me to just talk off the cuff here. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Great question. Thanks.
Okay, so at this point, we take public comments if you have any.
Oh, just wanted to mention briefly that the CAISO is a beneficiary of ASU's just really high quality power systems engineering program. We've got several of our high profile folks at CAISO working, so thank you for that gift over the years. Just wanted to express some appreciation there.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, we'd just like to thank you for coming today and give our regards to your president, Michael Crow, for hosting us here in Tempe, and that we look forward to the contribution that you make, which is quite considerable around the world and around this country. So thank you.
It's really wonderful to have you all here today, and thanks for the opportunity to speak on behalf of Arizona State University. Thanks.
Okay, if we have any public comments, sorry. If there's any public comment, please, in the room, please come up at this time. If not, Michelle, please check the Zoom and the phones, please.
Sure. And as a reminder, you can click the raise hand icon located at the bottom of your screen to enter the queue. And if you are on the phone, you can press #2 to enter the queue. I see no comments at this time.
All right, thank you.
Thanks all.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.